13 years ago, I opened my front door and found my sister's 6-month-old baby strapped into a carrier beside one diaper bag. The note on top said, "I can't do this anymore." When I called our mother, she told me, "She's your burden now." So I raised Harper. No birthdays from her mother. No calls from our family. Then Harper's biological father died and left her everything. The first time my sister came back, she brought a lawyer. I started to argue. Harper squeezed my hand and whispered, "Mom, just let her talk. If you've ever had to decide what family really means, stay with me." I was 22 when I found Harper on my doorstep, and until that evening, the biggest responsibility in my life was making sure my rent cleared before the utility bill did. I lived alone in a second-floor apartment outside Sacramento, the kind of place with beige walls, a narrow galley kitchen, and an air conditioner that rattled whenever it decided to work. I had just come home from a late payroll shift with a paper grocery bag tucked against my hip when I heard a baby crying somewhere in the breezeway. At first, I kept walking. There were families on both sides of me, and babies cried. Then I reached my door and realized the sound was coming from directly in front of it. The grocery bag slipped against my coat as I stopped. A gray infant carrier sat on the concrete landing, angled close to the wall, as if someone had tried to keep it out of the wind. Harper was strapped inside, her face blotchy from crying, one sock missing, both fists clenched near her cheeks. I recognized her before my mind accepted what I was seeing. I had held her twice since Ashley gave birth. 6 months old. Fine brown hair that never seemed to lie flat. A little crescent-shaped mark near her left temple. My niece. Beside the carrier sat one navy diaper bag. Nothing else. No suitcase, no folded stroller, no adult coat draped over the railing, no car idling at the curb below. I set my groceries down so fast a carton of eggs tipped sideways, then crouched and touched Harper's cheek. Her skin was cool from the evening air, but not frighteningly cold. She turned toward my hand and cried harder, mouth opening wide in outrage. That sound, more than anything, shook me out of the disbelief. Okay, sweetheart." I unbuckled her and pulled her against my chest. Her body was warm under her sleeper, lighter than I remembered. She smelled like formula, damp cotton, and the sour edge of a diaper overdue for changing. I looked over the railing, down toward the parking lot, half expecting Ashley to come running back and shout that this was some terrible joke. Nobody did. My phone was already in my hand when I noticed the piece of white notebook paper folded once on top of the diaper bag. My name was written across it in Ashley's slanted handwriting. Lauren. For one stupid second, I felt relief. A note meant an explanation. An explanation meant there was a plan. I opened it. There was only one sentence. "I can't do this anymore." I read it again, because my brain refused to attach the words to the baby pressed against me. Then I carried Harper inside. The first thing I did was not call anyone. It was put her on a clean bath towel on my living room rug and change her diaper because she was crying so hard she was beginning to hiccup. My hands shook through the whole thing. I had babysat once for maybe 2 hours, under Ashley's supervision, and I knew just enough to know how much I did not know. I checked Harper's fingers and toes, looked for bruising, watched the rise and fall of her chest. She was alert, angry, hungry. The diaper bag held 6 diapers, a half-full canister of formula, 1 bottle, 2 changes of clothes, a small packet of wipes, diaper cream, a photocopy of Harper's insurance card, and a thin receiving blanket. That was it. 1 bag packed, with enough things to get through a day or 2 if somebody was careful. Not enough for a life. I mixed formula with water from a sealed bottle I had in the refrigerator because I was too nervous to trust myself with anything more complicated. Harper took the bottle so urgently that I had to slow her down. While she ate, I called Ashley. Straight to voicemail. I called again, then again. On the 4th attempt, I left a message telling her to call me immediately. I did not shout. I was too frightened to shout. I said Harper was with me, that she was safe, and that Ashley needed to tell me what was happening. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I sent texts. I checked the parking lot from the window. I walked Harper from the couch to the door and back again, until she finished the bottle and went limp with exhausted trust against my shoulder. Ashley had always been impulsive. That was the word our mother used. Impulsive sounded softer than unreliable. Softer than the truth that, in our family, Ashley could create a crisis and the rest of us were expected to reorganize ourselves around it. When she forgot rent, Mom found money. When she quit a job because a manager didn't respect her, Mom called a cousin who was hiring. When she missed a family dinner, I packed a plate because somebody had to. But a baby was not a parking ticket or an unpaid phone bill. I called our mother. Diane answered on the third ring, sounding irritated before I finished saying hello. I asked if Ashley was with her. There was a pause just long enough to change the temperature of the room. Mom said no. I told her what I had found. Another pause. Not surprise. Not the sharp intake of breath I expected. Something flatter. Did you know? I asked. She told me Ashley had been overwhelmed. She said Ashley had called earlier saying she needed a break, that everything had become too much, that she felt trapped. Mom spoke as if she were explaining why someone had left a party early. I looked down at Harper's head, tucked under my chin. Then come over, I said. We need to find her. We need to figure out what happens with Harper tonight. Mom exhaled. I'm not getting in the middle of this. I thought I had misheard her. Mom, there is a 6-month-old baby in my apartment. I know how old she is. She was outside my door. I said I know. My fear sharpened into anger. Then get in your car. Her voice went cold in the way it always did when she decided I was the difficult one. Ashley knew the baby would be safe with you. That sentence landed harder than if she had shouted. Safe with me. As if that made any of this acceptable. I told her I was not asking whether Harper was safe for the next hour. I was asking where Harper's mother was and who was taking responsibility. Mom's answer came without hesitation. She's your burden now. I stopped pacing. Harper made a small swallowing sound against my shoulder. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's door slammed. The ordinary noise of the building went on, while something in my family cracked cleanly in half. She is not a burden, I said. Mom started to answer, but I ended the call. Until then, part of me had still believed an older, more competent adult would arrive and tell me what to do. That belief disappeared with the dead screen in my hand. I called the county child welfare hotline. Once I did that, the night changed. It stopped being Ashley's private disaster and became a record with times, names, questions, and instructions. I explained that Harper had been left outside my apartment, in a carrier with a bag and note. I gave Ashley's full name, Harper's birth date, Ryan Cole's name as the father, and my address. The worker asked whether Harper appeared injured, whether she was breathing normally, whether I knew how long she had been outside. I did not. That answer made my stomach twist. I was told not to throw away the note or move anything else from the bag unnecessarily. Because Harper was alert and feeding but had been left unattended, I was directed to have her checked and to cooperate with the responding officer and welfare staff. The next several hours blurred into fluorescent lights and forms. A patrol officer photographed the note and the carrier, took my statement, and documented my attempts to reach Ashley. At an after-hours pediatric clinic, Harper was examined and pronounced tired, hungry, and otherwise stable. No dramatic diagnosis. No hidden injury. Just a 6-month-old baby who should never have been left alone long enough for anyone to wonder how cold her hands had gotten. That almost made me angrier. If she had been sick, there would have been something concrete to fight. Instead, the harm was the decision itself. By the time I returned home, it was past midnight. Harper had fallen asleep against my chest in the waiting room, and woke as soon as I tried to put her down. I had no crib. I had no bassinet. I had one throw blanket, a couch, and a list of safe sleep instructions I had been made to repeat back before leaving the clinic. A welfare worker helped arrange a portable crib for the night and told me someone would follow up in the morning. Because Harper was safe with a relative, and there was no immediate allegation that I posed any risk to her, they were not opening a juvenile dependency case that night. But nobody pretended I could simply keep a baby indefinitely because we shared blood. I sat on the edge of my couch while Harper slept a few feet away and stared at Ashley's note inside a clear evidence sleeve the officer had returned after photographing it. I can't do this anymore. The sentence felt different now, less like panic, more like a transfer. Morning brought phone calls. Ashley still did not answer. A worker reached Ryan through information already connected to Harper's records. I knew who he was, but barely. He and Ashley had never built anything that looked stable. What I learned was relayed to me in plain terms. Ryan acknowledged Harper was his daughter. He was not coming to take custody. His housing and life were not suitable for an infant, and he said he would cooperate with whatever formal process was necessary. I remember standing at my kitchen counter when I heard that, and looking at the formula canister beside my coffee maker. Mother gone, father declining custody, grandmother refusing involvement, and me, wearing yesterday's sweatshirt, trying to calculate when a baby needed her next bottle. The worker explained what came next. If Harper remained with me even temporarily, I needed legal authority for ordinary things that suddenly mattered. Medical consent, daycare, records, decisions. Because child welfare had confirmed she was safe in relative care and was not opening a dependency petition, I could seek a temporary probate guardianship of the person while the adults were located and notified. The words sounded enormous. Guardianship. Petition. Hearing. I had known Harper for 6 months. I had never once imagined signing a court form about her. The worker did not pressure me. That was almost worse. She asked whether I was willing to keep Harper while the process moved forward. I looked at the baby in the borrowed portable crib. I said yes. Saying yes did not make me Harper's legal guardian. It only meant I was the person standing there when everyone else had stepped back. The distinction became painfully clear the next morning when I called a daycare near my office, and the woman on the phone asked what documentation I had authorizing me to enroll a child who was not mine. I had the police incident number, Harper's insurance card, the welfare worker's contact information, and a note from my sister that fit in one hand. None of those things turned me into a parent on paper, so I spent part of that day moving between phone calls and the courthouse self-help center with Harper strapped to my chest in a borrowed carrier. The forms asked for information I did not have: Ashley's current address, Ryan's full living situation, the names of relatives who might object. I wrote what I knew and marked what I did not. The welfare documentation showed that Harper had been left with me, had been medically checked, and was safe in my care. I was told an emergency temporary order could give me limited authority while notice and a fuller hearing were arranged, but it was not a shortcut around the parents. The court still had to know who they were and make reasonable efforts to notify them. That mattered to me, even through the fear. I did not want anyone to be able to say I had quietly taken Ashley's child because it was convenient. Nothing about my life was convenient anymore. I wanted a record that showed exactly what had happened. Ashley had left Harper. I had called. I had asked our mother for help. I had contacted authorities. Ryan had been reached and was not asking to take her. And I was saying yes, only after every easier answer had disappeared. When the temporary paperwork finally gave me enough authority to handle medical care and arrange daycare while the case moved forward, I felt relief for about 10 seconds. Then the clerk handed the documents back to me, and I saw my name beside Harper's. Temporary guardian. The words were supposed to describe a short bridge. They felt like the beginning of a road I could not see the end of. The first week rearranged my life with a speed that would have been funny if I had not been so tired. My manager moved my shift after I explained enough of the situation to sound coherent. A coworker gave me a used infant bathtub. I bought a car seat after learning that the carrier Ashley had left was not something I should assume was safe without knowing its history. I compared daycare rates and nearly laughed at the numbers because the other option was crying. I did not become noble. I became organized. I made lists, formula, diapers, safe sleep, clinic follow-up, court forms. I put the note in a folder with the police incident number and every screenshot of my unanswered calls. Not because I imagined it as evidence in some future battle, because every agency I spoke to asked for dates, and I was terrified I would forget something important if I did not write it down. At night, when Harper woke, fear made me move before I was fully conscious. I checked her breathing. I checked the room temperature. I counted ounces. I set alarms. Control was the only thing I knew how to build out of chaos. Ashley remained unreachable. I called less often after the first week, not because I stopped wanting an answer, but because hearing her voicemail had begun to feel like volunteering to be abandoned again. The temporary guardianship forms made the family excuses blunt. Ashley was unavailable, Ryan was not requesting custody, and Harper needed an adult authorized to make decisions. At the courthouse self-help center, a woman explained the next steps without promising an outcome notice. Where possible, relatives identified, and a judge deciding whether I understood the responsibility and could actually care for Harper. I could not hide behind the idea that I was only helping for a few days. That realization came one afternoon when the temporary order was in place, and I was sitting in a daycare office with Harper on my lap. The director slid an enrollment packet toward me and asked how long the placement was expected to last. "I don't know," I said. She waited. Harper grabbed the corner of the packet and tried to put it in her mouth. I gently pulled it away. That tiny motion did something to me. Maybe because it was so ordinary. Nobody applauded. Nobody called me generous. A baby reached for paper, and I stopped her from eating it. I was beginning to understand that care was made of 1,000 moments too small for anyone else to notice. By the third week, a legal aid attorney asked whether, if Ashley did not return, I would be willing to petition for a general guardianship instead of letting the temporary arrangement expire into another emergency. The question sat between us. I thought about my apartment, my paycheck, the daycare bill, the promotion track I had been chasing. I thought about being 22 and how every version of my future I had imagined belonged only to me. Then I thought about Harper being moved because I was afraid to say yes before I knew how hard yes would become. "I'll petition," I said. It was the first time I made a decision for her that nobody had pushed into my hands. After that, the days stopped feeling like I was waiting for Ashley to return and started feeling like I was preparing for the possibility that she would not. A hearing date was set. Notice had to go out. Ryan could be located. Ashley still could not. The process for attempting notice continued without producing my sister. The night before the hearing, Harper woke around 2 a.m. I fed her in the dim light from the kitchen and held her until her body softened against mine. She had started gripping my shirt while she drank, a reflexive little fist closing over the fabric as if she needed proof I was still there. When I laid her back down, she stayed asleep. I stood beside the portable crib longer than I needed to. The hearing notice was on my table. My name was printed beneath hers. The word guardian appeared more than once. For weeks, I had told myself everything was temporary. The crib, the daycare, the forms, the bottles drying beside my sink. But Ashley had not called. She had not come to the door. And if she did not walk into that courtroom the next morning, temporary would no longer mean what I had been pretending it meant. The next morning, I carried Harper into a courtroom in the same borrowed carrier I had used at the self-help center. She wore a yellow sleeper with tiny white clouds on it because it was the only clean outfit that had not been stained with formula overnight. I had slept maybe 2 hours. My hair was tied back badly. My hands smelled faintly of baby lotion, and the folder on my lap contained more paper than I had ever needed to explain any decision in my life. I kept watching the door. Every time it opened, my body tightened before my mind could catch up. A clerk came in, then another family, then a man carrying a stack of files. Not Ashley. I had spent the night telling myself I did not want her to appear. If she walked in angry, confused, or determined to take Harper back, everything could become harder. But another part of me still wanted to see her come through that door, because a mother should have to look at the child she had left before a stranger in a black robe decided what came next. Ryan did not come either. His position had already been communicated through the process. He was Harper's father. He knew the hearing was happening. He was not asking for custody, and he was not opposing me. Later, a formal support arrangement would be established once his income and location were documented, but that morning all I understood was the simpler truth. Neither biological parent was there, asking to take their daughter home. The hearing itself was less dramatic than I had imagined. No one shouted. Nobody gave a speech about family. The judge reviewed the filings, the temporary order, the welfare documentation, the attempts at notice, and the information about Ryan. I answered questions about my job, my apartment, daycare, medical care, and whether I understood that guardianship was a legal responsibility rather than a favor I could stop doing on a difficult week. I said I understood. That answer felt bigger than the room. Harper woke once and made a soft, complaining sound. I shifted her against me and rubbed her back until she settled. The judge looked at us for a second, then returned to the paperwork. When the order was made, I was appointed guardian of Harper's person. The words should have felt like victory. Instead, they landed with the weight of something permanent. On the courthouse steps, I stood still while people moved around me. There was no Ashley rushing up the sidewalk. No Ryan, no Diane. I had legal authority now. I could consent to Harper's medical care, make decisions, sign forms, enroll her where she needed to go. The state had given a name to what I was already doing, but nobody had fought me for the job. That was the part I could not celebrate. I looked down at Harper. She was chewing on the edge of her bib. "I guess it's you and me," I whispered. She blinked at me and kept chewing. In the months that followed, the temporary things began disappearing one by one. The borrowed crib was replaced with one I bought after saving for 2 paychecks. My apartment acquired a high chair, then a gate across the kitchen entrance, then a row of brightly colored plastic cups I once would have considered ugly enough to ban from my home. I stopped thinking of daycare as an emergency arrangement and started thinking about who Harper liked there, which teacher could calm her, and which days I needed to leave work on time, because she noticed if I was late. The support from Ryan eventually began arriving through formal channels. It mattered. Babies were expensive, and toddlers did not get cheaper just because they became more interesting. But the money came without a voice attached to it. No call asking whether Harper was walking. No message when she got her first tooth. No request for a picture. I told myself not to assign meaning too early. People failed in different ways. Ryan had at least acknowledged responsibility on paper. Ashley had vanished into silence. Diane had made her choice clear. Still, I kept my phone number the same. For a long time, I did not admit to myself why. Harper was almost 2 when she first called me Mom. Not Mama exactly. More like Mum, soft and uncertain, because she had been trying different sounds for weeks, and most of them meant 3 things at once. We were on the kitchen floor sorting laundry because she had emptied the basket faster than I could fold it. She held up one of my socks, looked at me with complete seriousness, and said, "Mom." I froze. She grinned because my face had changed, and said it again. There was no audience, no family member to correct her, no legal form asking me what title I preferred, just a toddler sitting among towels. I picked her up. For a while afterward, I wondered whether I should teach her to call me Aunt Lauren. I knew what the court papers said. I knew biology had not changed, because I had been there for bedtime and fevers and daycare pickup. I also knew children could build identity around whatever adults made easiest for them, but I could not make myself turn the word mom into something forbidden. What I did instead was decide that if Harper was going to call me mom, I would never use that word to lie to her. When she was 4, she noticed that our last names were different on a preschool form. She wanted to know why she was Harper Cole and I was Lauren Mitchell. I gave her the simplest true answer I could. I told her Ashley was the woman who gave birth to her and that Ryan was her biological father. I told her I was her aunt by birth and her guardian by law, but I was the person raising her. She listened with the serious expression children get when they are trying to fit new information into a world they thought was finished. "Can I still call you Mom?" The question hurt in a place I did not know had become vulnerable. "Yes," I said. "If that's what you want to call me." She nodded as if the matter was settled and asked for apple slices. It was not settled for me. From that day on, I understood that motherhood in our house was never going to depend on pretending the past did not exist. I kept the explanation age-appropriate, but I did not invent a dead mother, an adoption story, or a heroic excuse. Ashley existed. Ryan existed. Harper had come to me. Because neither of them was raising her. Those facts belonged to Harper, even when she was too young to hold all of them at once. For years, I expected one of those facts to knock on the door. On Harper's 5th birthday, I left my phone on the kitchen counter beside the cake while 6 children chased each other through our living room wearing paper crowns. I told myself it was because I was taking pictures. Really, I was waiting. Ashley had never called after the hearing. Diane had not become the grandmother who slowly realized she had made a terrible mistake. Ryan's support continued to arrive, adjusted when his income changed, but he did not send a birthday card or ask for visitation. By 8 that evening, the children were gone. Frosting was ground into the rug, and my phone showed calls from a coworker and the dentist. Nothing else. Harper did not notice. I did. That was the last birthday I waited all day. By elementary school, I had become fluent in the strange gap between legal language and ordinary life. School forms had boxes for mother, father, parent, guardian. Sometimes I checked guardian. Sometimes a receptionist called me Mom without looking at the paperwork. And I answered, because explaining everything in a crowded office would have made Harper feel like an exception when she was just there for a vaccination record or a permission slip. Once, when Harper was 9, she stared at a form longer than usual and asked, "If you're my mom, why does this say guardian?" We were sitting at the dining table after dinner. The word looked cold in black ink. "Because that's the legal job I have," I told her. "Is it different?" "Yes." "Does it matter?" I wanted to say no. Instead, I said, "Sometimes it matters to courts and paperwork. It doesn't change who gets you up for school tomorrow." She smiled. "You, unfortunately." That was Harper by then, observant enough to find the sore spot, kind enough not to press it every time. Another year, she asked about Ryan. Not after a crisis. Not on Father's Day. We were driving home from a grocery store when she saw a man carrying a little girl on his shoulders in the parking lot. "Does my biological dad know I exist?" The question came so casually, I almost answered too fast. "Yes." She looked out the window. "He knows?" "Yes." "Then why doesn't he call?" There are moments when adults want to protect children by filling silence with explanations we do not actually possess. Maybe he was ashamed. Maybe he thought staying away was better. Maybe he did not know how to start. Maybe he loved her in some limited way. I knew none of that. So I told her the only thing I knew. "I don't know why he doesn't call." She was quiet the rest of the drive. A few weeks later, the support deposit arrived the same way it always did. For the first time, I hated seeing it. Not because the money was wrong. Ryan owed support. Harper deserved it. But the deposit proved what I had already told her. He knew where responsibility was supposed to go. He just never sent himself with it. That distinction became part of the way I thought about all three of them. Ashley's silence was not one bad night. Diane's silence was not one cruel sentence. Ryan's absence was not erased by monthly support. Every year without a call became another choice layered over the first one. I did not explain it to Harper that way. I did not need to. Children keep their own calendars of who shows up. By the time Harper reached middle school, she no longer asked whether Ashley might come back. She knew her birth mother's name. She knew the rough outline of how she had come to live with me. She knew there had been a court process, and that I was her legal guardian. She did not yet know every detail of the note or Diane's exact words. Some truths I had held back because I thought there was a difference between honesty and handing a child a weapon before she knew what it could cut. At the time, I believed that distinction made me careful. I did not yet understand how easily careful could become controlling. 13 years passed from the night Harper appeared on my doorstep. In 2026, she was 13 and a half, and I was 35. The little girl who had once grabbed enrollment papers to chew on now left algebra worksheets spread across my kitchen table and corrected my pronunciation of bands I had no interest in learning. Our life was not solemn. That mattered. Harper rolled her eyes when I reminded her to charge her phone. I accused her of believing dirty glasses transported themselves to the dishwasher. She believed 2 sweatshirts on the floor did not constitute a messy room. I believed they were the beginning of civilization's collapse. On an ordinary Tuesday morning, we argued about a permission form for an 8th grade field trip. I gave it to you. You put it under a pizza coupon. That is still giving it to you. That is hiding it in trash. It wasn't trash. It was 20% off. Harper took the form out from under the coupon, slid it toward me, and pointed to the signature line. Mom. I signed it. No hesitation. No thought. That word had become so ordinary between us that I barely noticed it, unless somebody else did. Our house by then was a modest 2-bedroom place I had bought after years of saving and moving up at work. My job in payroll operations was steady. Harper had friends within biking distance, a favorite teacher, a dentist who had known her since 1st grade, and a drawer full of art supplies she insisted were organized, despite all physical evidence. Stability was no longer something I was building one emergency at a time. It was the air around us. That was why the phone call caught me so completely off guard. It came shortly after lunch while I was at work. The caller introduced himself as an attorney working with the estate of Ryan Cole. For a second, the name sounded familiar in the abstract, like somebody from an old employee file. Then I understood. Ryan. Harper's father. I closed my office door. The attorney was careful. Ryan had died after a short illness. He had been 40 years old. There were probate matters to address, and because Harper was a minor and was named in his will, the attorney needed to speak with me as her legal guardian. I wrote his name on a yellow legal pad even though I already knew it. Ryan Cole, dead. I asked when it had happened. I asked whether Harper had been notified by anyone else. He said, to his knowledge, no. The estate had records of the guardianship and was contacting me through the information available to them. My next question came from 13 years of habit. Was he married? The attorney said he would go through the family information and the will formally when we met. He did not want to give me partial answers over an initial call. I thanked him, wrote down the appointment information, and sat at my desk after we hung up. I had imagined many versions of Ryan showing up too late. None of them involved his death arriving before he ever did. I left work early. Harper was at the kitchen table when I got home, headphones around her neck and a bowl of cereal in front of her, even though it was nearly 4 in the afternoon. She took one look at me and pulled one earbud free. What happened? I sat across from her. There was no gentle way to make a stranger's death feel like family news. Ryan Cole died. Harper's face did not change immediately. My dad? Yes. She looked down at the cereal, then back at me. When? I told her what little I knew. Short illness. Recently, an attorney had called because Ryan had a will and she was named in it. Harper leaned back in her chair. I watched feelings move across her face without settling into any one of them. Shock, maybe. Confusion. Something like embarrassment that she did not know how sad she was supposed to look. Am I supposed to cry? The question broke my heart more than tears would have. No. Was he sick for a long time? I don't know. Did he ever ask about me? I don't know that either. She turned the spoon slowly in the cereal until the remaining flakes went soft. Then she asked, "Why am I in his will?" I don't know yet. That answer frustrated her. I could see it. She had spent her whole life with adults who knew pieces of her origin and gave them to her in portions. Now a dead man had added another piece, and neither of us knew what it meant. The attorney had said there was property involved, but I deliberately did not speculate about an amount. Ryan had done well in business over the years. I knew that only because his support obligation had changed with his documented income and because formal notices occasionally crossed my desk. I did not know his home, his friends, his habits, or whether he had kept a picture of Harper anywhere. Money was the only part of his life that had ever reliably crossed into ours. That evening, Harper did homework in the living room instead of her bedroom. She did not talk about Ryan again until I was rinsing dishes. Did he know I called you Mom? I turned off the faucet. I don't know. She nodded. Then, after a pause, she said, "He knew I existed, though." "Yes." "And he paid support." "Yes." "But he never called." "No." She rubbed her thumb along the edge of a chipped mug. "Why would he leave me something when he never called me?" It was the same kind of question she had asked years earlier in the car. A question that invited me to make a dead man easier to understand than he had earned. I dried my hands. "I don't know, Harper." She looked at me for another second and accepted the answer, not because it satisfied her, but because she knew by then that I would rather give her an empty space than fill it with a lie. 2 days later, the estate attorney called again to confirm the meeting. This time he added one detail. Harper had not been left a small keepsake or a token account. She was the principal beneficiary under Ryan's will, and because she was only 13, the court would have to be involved in protecting whatever passed to her. I looked across my office at the framed school picture on my shelf. For 13 years, courts had been part of our life, mostly as old paperwork in a drawer. The guardianship order was something I renewed information around when required, not something I thought about each morning. Now Ryan's death was about to bring the legal system back to our door, and I still had no idea what, exactly, he had left behind. 3 days later, Harper and I sat across from Ryan Cole's estate attorney in a quiet conference room. Harper had insisted on coming. I had considered going alone first so I could soften whatever I learned, but Ryan's will and death belonged to her life before they belonged to my fear. The attorney's name was Martin Ellison. He was careful with every sentence, and so matter-of-fact that the size of what he told us took several seconds to register. Ryan had never married, and had no other children the estate had identified. After debts, expenses, and a few small gifts, the rest went to Harper. All of it. Martin slid a summary across the table. Ryan had sold his interest in a commercial HVAC company, kept a brokerage portfolio, and sold property he had owned with a business partner. The residuary estate was estimated at roughly $4.6 million after expected obligations. I stared at the number until it stopped looking like money and started looking like a problem. Harper did not touch the paper. "So he just left it to me?" "That is what the will says," Martin told her. She looked at me, then back at him. "All of it?" Martin confirmed it without drama. Harper's mouth tightened. There was no excitement in her face. She had spent the last several days trying to understand why a man who had never called her would put her at the center of his will, and a larger number did not answer that question. It only made it stranger. My first thought was not college or a house, or what the money could buy. It was that Harper was 13 and a half. She could not manage millions of dollars herself, and I had spent 13 years learning how quickly adults could attach their own needs to a child. Martin explained the practical part. Because the will left the property to Harper outright, rather than through a trust or named custodian, the probate process would require a court-supervised arrangement for managing her property while she was a minor. The person caring for Harper day to day and the person responsible for the estate did not have to be the same. Whoever handled the money would have fiduciary duties, accounting requirements, and court oversight. I felt Harper glance at me. "I don't want to control it," I said. Martin paused. "You would be eligible to ask the court to consider you." "I understand. I'm saying I don't want to." It was not false modesty. I had supported Harper before Ryan died and intended to keep doing it. If a large inheritance was going to sit beside our family life, I wanted a wall between the money and every decision I made as her mother. Harper finally looked down at the summary. "Then who does?" Martin said, "A professional fiduciary could be proposed." He gave us information about a woman named Judith Hale, who had spent years managing protected estates and conservatorship assets. She had no connection to Ryan, to me, or to Ashley. That last name was not spoken yet, but I heard it anyway. Martin had one more thing to explain. Notice would have to go to people the law required to be notified, including Harper's living biological parent. The estate had Ashley's name from older records, but not a reliable current address. Counsel and a process server would use ordinary public and employment records to locate her. My body went still. For 13 years, Ashley's absence had become so normal that I had stopped thinking of her as someone with an address where legal papers could find her. Of course, she had a life somewhere. She had simply built it without Harper. Harper noticed my face. "They have to tell her?" "Yes," I said. Martin answered more carefully. "There are notice requirements we have to follow. Telling her about the proceeding does not give her ownership of the estate." I knew that. My fear did not care. We left with a packet about Judith, and a fact that changed our quiet life. Ryan had left Harper enough money to secure her future. Protecting it meant opening a legal door to the person I had believed would never return. On the drive home, Harper kept the packet closed on her lap. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked. "Not the number." "Okay." After a while, she said, "If he wanted me to have it, I guess that's what he wanted." It was not forgiveness. It was permission for Ryan's last decision to exist without rewriting every decision before it. I told her we did not have to decide what the inheritance meant emotionally in the same week we learned it existed. We only had to make sure nobody treated it like ordinary spending money. Harper nodded and asked whether she still had to finish 8th grade if she was technically rich. I told her algebra remained undefeated by probate. That made her smile, which I needed more than I admitted. A week later, I met with Daniel Mercer, a probate and guardianship attorney Martin recommended, because the estate and my existing guardianship were about to overlap. When I told him I wanted Judith considered, he asked whether I understood that doing so meant giving up direct authority over Harper's money. "That's the point," I said. He studied me for a second, then nodded. We began preparing the paperwork and coordinating with Martin's office. That normality lasted until my phone buzzed on a Thursday afternoon while I was standing in the grocery store. The message came from a number I did not recognize. "Lauren, this is Ashley." I stopped breathing. A woman pushing a cart behind me muttered an apology when I did not move. I stepped aside without looking up. There was a second message. "I received legal notice about Harper and Ryan's estate. We need to talk about my daughter and her father's estate. Not hello. Not I'm sorry. Not how is she. My daughter and her father's estate." I read the words until the screen dimmed. Then I called Daniel. He asked me not to respond emotionally. If Ashley had been properly located and served, then the contact itself was not surprising. He told me to forward the message and let him know if any attorney contacted me. At home, I told Harper Ashley had sent a message. Harper's pencil stopped moving. What did she say? I showed her. She read it once and handed my phone back. Her expression was difficult to read. No, how are you? She said. No. Maybe she assumes she'll ask in person. It startled me that Harper was willing to offer Ashley even that much possibility. I wanted to say that 13 years had already answered the question. Instead, I put my phone face down on the counter. She may have a lawyer contact Daniel, I said. We don't know what she wants yet. Harper looked at the packet from the estate meeting, which had been sitting untouched in a drawer since we came home. She knows how much? I don't know exactly what the notice included. She knows there is an estate proceeding, and that you're involved. Harper nodded slowly. That was fast. It was. 13 years of silence, followed by contact within days of a legal notice. But timing was not proof of motive. Daniel said that to me twice over the next 48 hours, because I kept trying to make it proof. Then a representation letter arrived from Rebecca Sloan. Rebecca was an attorney. She wrote in clean, restrained language. Ashley wanted to discuss reunification with Harper, review the existing guardianship, and ensure that Ashley was not improperly excluded from decisions concerning Harper's property. She claimed she had been stable for years and wanted an opportunity to re-establish a relationship. The letter did not say Ashley wanted money, but my pulse jumped at the word property. Daniel suggested that if Ashley and Rebecca wanted an initial conversation, there could be one with clear limits. I resisted immediately. He reminded me that hearing what Ashley was claiming was not the same as agreeing to it. Harper, when I told her, was quieter than I expected. Do I have to see her? No. Can I? The question landed in me like a dropped glass. I did not answer quickly enough. Harper's eyes narrowed. Mom, you can, I said, but not alone, and not without us knowing what the meeting is for. She accepted that. I told myself I did too. The meeting was scheduled at our house on Saturday, because Harper did not want her first look at Ashley to happen in a lawyer's office. Daniel told me what not to sign, and asked me to call afterward. Rebecca confirmed nothing would be settled at my dining table. I spent Saturday morning cleaning a house that was already clean. By noon, Harper asked whether I planned to polish the front window with my forehead. At 1:30, a dark sedan pulled up in front of the house. I knew Ashley before she reached the walkway. 13 years had changed her face, but not the way she moved. She was 38 now, her hair shorter, her posture more controlled than I remembered. She wore a navy coat over a cream blouse and carried a leather folder. The woman beside her was older, composed, dressed in a charcoal suit. Rebecca Sloan. For a few seconds, all I could see was the apartment breezeway from 13 years earlier. One carrier, one bag, one note. Then Ashley reached my front door and knocked. I opened it. Her eyes went straight past me. Harper stood several feet behind me. Ashley's face changed. It was the first genuine thing I saw. She looked stunned that a 6-month-old baby had become a 13-year-old girl without her. Ashley opened her mouth, closed it, then said Harper's name. Harper did not move toward her. Rebecca introduced herself and asked if we could sit down. Her professional tone made everything more real. We sat around the dining table. Harper took the chair beside me. Ashley sat across from us with Rebecca at her right. Rebecca spoke first. She explained that Ashley intended to ask the probate court to terminate or modify the existing guardianship of Harper's person so that reunification and parental custody could be considered. She said Ashley believed the arrangement that began 13 years earlier had been created during a period of crisis, and that Ashley's current circumstances were substantially different. She also intended to participate in the proceedings concerning Harper's estate, and objected to being treated as though she had no parental interest in decisions involving her daughter. My hands went cold under the table. I had known the words might come. Knowing did nothing. You left her outside my apartment, I said to Ashley. Rebecca glanced at me but did not interrupt. Ashley held my eyes. I left her with you. You left her in a carrier by the door. I knew you would take her inside. You wrote one sentence and disappeared. Her jaw tightened. I was 25, Lauren. I had nowhere stable to live. Ryan was useless. I was falling apart. And then you stayed gone for 13 years. Harper shifted beside me. I felt it, but kept going. Ashley said she had not understood the guardianship as the permanent erasure of her role. She said she had believed Harper was safe, and that every year away made coming back harder. Shame became avoidance. Avoidance became distance. Her life had stabilized slowly. She had a job now, an apartment, health insurance, no criminal record, nothing that made her obviously unfit to stand in a room and say she had changed. That was what frightened me. Ashley had not arrived incoherent or obviously unstable. She sat at my table looking like a woman who paid bills on time. Then she began talking about what a mother should be entitled to know. Who had selected Judith Hale? Why had a professional fiduciary been proposed before Ashley was consulted? Why was a stranger being considered to manage her daughter's money? Why had Lauren been allowed to make every decision for years, while the legal mother was now being told to stand outside both the family and the estate? I answered too fast. Because you were outside the family. You chose that. Ashley's eyes flashed. You made sure of it. That is not what happened. I asked for a conversation, and before I even arrived, you had a lawyer. You arrived with one. Rebecca quietly said they were not there to relitigate every sentence at the table. She tried to pull the conversation back to the present. Ashley wanted reunification, review of guardianship, and a voice in decisions concerning Harper. A voice in her life? Or in her money? I asked. Ashley leaned forward. Both matter. I'm her mother. I should know who controls her property. I should have a say in what happens to it. Why does some stranger get more authority over my daughter's future than I do? My daughter, I repeated. The room tightened. I was about to remind her who had packed the diaper bag, who had signed school forms, who had sat beside Harper through 13 years. Ashley had not bothered to witness. I could feel every old fact lining up behind my teeth. Then Harper touched my hand. Not hard, just enough. I looked at her. She was watching Ashley, not me. Mom, just let her talk. The word mom crossed the table before the rest of the sentence did. Ashley's expression flickered. I stopped speaking. For the first time since she entered my house, I did exactly what Harper asked, instead of what my fear demanded. Ashley kept talking. At first she returned to reunification. She wanted to know Harper as a person, and knew she could not erase 13 years. Then she circled back to authority. A biological mother should not have to request information from a fiduciary. A mother should have input into school, medical care, and money. Why should an outsider decide what counted as a proper expense? Harper said almost nothing. She watched. Harper was not setting a trap. She was collecting a first impression, without me contaminating it with my anger. And the impression was complicated. Ashley did look at Harper when she spoke about regret. Her voice changed when she admitted she had imagined Harper younger than she was, as though some part of her had frozen the child at 6 months. There was real emotion there. I could not honestly deny it. But every path Ashley took toward motherhood seemed to arrive at the same intersection. Authority. Who decided? Who controlled? Who had a right to know about the estate? Rebecca redirected her twice. Each time Ashley complied for a minute, then returned to the idea that being restored as Harper's mother should mean more than supervised conversation, while other people held every legal lever. When the meeting ended, Ashley asked Harper if she could hug her. Harper hesitated. Then she said, "Not today." Ashley looked hurt, but she nodded. That too was real. After they left, Harper watched the sedan pull away from the window. "What do you think?" I asked. She shrugged once. "I think she practiced some of that." "Probably. I think some of it was true. The answer stung more than I expected. Harper looked at me. That doesn't mean I trust her. I know. She talked about the money a lot. I noticed. I wanted to see if she would stop. She didn't. Harper picked up a glass from the table and carried it to the sink. No. That was all she said. I called Daniel. By Monday morning, Rebecca's petition had been filed. Ashley was asking the court to end the guardianship of Harper's person and consider reunification based on rehabilitation and current stability. She also preserved her ability to participate in the estate proceeding. What happened at my table was now a case. Daniel met me in his office that afternoon. I brought the old guardianship order in the same folder where I still kept a copy of Ashley's note. He read the new filing, then looked at me. First thing, he said, guardianship is not adoption. I hated the sentence before he finished explaining it. Ashley's 13-year absence mattered. The stability Harper had with me mattered. The circumstances of the abandonment mattered. But Ashley was still a biological parent, asking a court to review an existing guardianship. The court would look at the history, Ashley's present condition, Harper's best interests, and because Harper was 13 and a half, Harper's own wishes. I heard only the last part. Her wishes can change the case? They matter. My chest tightened. Daniel watched me carefully. Lauren, do not turn that into a reason to keep Harper from information. I'm not. I was already planning to. No calls from Ashley. No private messages. No visits. No direct contact until the court sorted it out. I could lock down Harper's phone, update the school, make sure nobody released her to anyone else. I could keep the walls high enough that nothing unexpected got through. Daniel must have seen the plan forming on my face. The court is going to look at everyone, he said. Not just Ashley. I stared at him. He tapped the petition once. Fear is understandable, but if you use fear to block every possible contact before anyone has evaluated what Harper wants, you may hand Ashley an argument she does not have yet. I barely heard the warning. All I could think was that 13 years earlier, Ashley had put a baby on my doorstep and trusted me to pick her up. Now she had come back with a lawyer asking a court to decide whether I still got to be the one holding on. The first thing I did after leaving Daniel's office was exactly what he had warned me not to do. I called Harper's school. I told the front office there was an active guardianship dispute and asked them to confirm that no one except the people already listed on my authorization forms could sign Harper out, request records, change contact information, or appear at school claiming to be family. The woman I spoke to was calm and familiar with custody paperwork. She told me they would follow the legal documents they had on file and asked me to send anything new through the district's secure system. Nothing about that request was irrational. If a parent I had not seen in 13 years suddenly appeared in the middle of a legal fight, any responsible guardian would make sure a school knew who was authorized to pick up a child. The irrational part came afterward. I changed the privacy settings on Harper's phone. I told her not to answer numbers she did not know. I asked Daniel to tell Rebecca that Ashley was not to contact Harper directly until the court had established a process. I moved the copy of Ashley's petition from the kitchen counter into the locked drawer in my bedroom, then told myself it was because Harper should not have to read adult accusations about her life before breakfast. By the time I was finished, I had turned our house into something that looked exactly like safety from the inside. From the outside, it could look like a wall. Harper noticed before I was ready to admit what I was doing. 2 evenings after the petition was filed, she came into the kitchen holding her phone. Did you change something? I kept chopping an onion. Privacy settings. Why? Because there's a legal case now. She leaned against the counter. Did Ashley try to message me? No. Then why are you changing things before she does? I set the knife down more carefully than necessary. Because I'm trying to keep you from getting dragged into something before we know what the rules are. Her expression went flat. I'm already in it. That should have stopped me. Instead, I reached for the explanation I had been using since she was little. You don't need to carry all of this. Harper looked at me for a long second. You keep saying that like it means I don't get to know it. She walked out before I could answer. The onion stung my eyes. I blamed the onion. A few days later, Daniel sent me Ashley's filed declaration. He had highlighted sections he wanted me to read and crossed out nothing, even though I knew he could see how angry some of the language would make me. Ashley did not deny the doorstep. That surprised me more than a denial would have. She admitted leaving Harper at my apartment. She admitted writing the note. She described herself at 25 as unstable, ashamed, without secure housing, emotionally overwhelmed, and unable to provide a safe home. She said she chose me because I had always been the responsible one, and because she believed Harper would be safe with me. The facts were the same. The meaning was different. In Ashley's version, she had not discarded a child. She had made a desperate temporary placement with someone she trusted during a crisis. The guardianship, she wrote, had become permanent while she was frightened, ashamed, and increasingly convinced that there was no path back into Harper's life. She wrote that she had understood Lauren's role as protective and temporary at first. I read that sentence 3 times. Temporary. I could still remember the one bag, 6 diapers, half a can of formula, the note that did not say when she was coming back, where she was going, or how to reach her. But Ashley's declaration was not written for me. It was written for a court, and a court did not have my memory inside its walls. It had documents, history, present circumstances, and competing explanations. She described the life she had now. Stable employment as a leasing manager. The same apartment for several years. Health insurance. No criminal history. No substance abuse record. References from supervisors and colleagues. She had become, on paper, exactly the kind of adult I had spent 13 years assuming she would never bother to become. That was the part that unsettled me most. If Ashley had come back chaotic, homeless, or visibly reckless, I could have organized my fear around something concrete. Instead, she had a lease, a salary, a lawyer, and the vocabulary of rehabilitation. Daniel and I went through the declaration in his office. He did not let me treat every sentence as a lie just because I hated the conclusion. Her past matters, he told me. A lot. 13 years matters. Harper's stability matters. But the court is not being asked whether Ashley deserves forgiveness. It's being asked what arrangement serves Harper now. I hated how reasonable he sounded. And she can really ask to end the guardianship after all this time? She can ask? That's not what I asked. I know. He explained that being Harper's emotional mother did not erase the procedural fact that I was her guardian, not her adoptive parent. Ashley's absence would weigh heavily. So would the circumstances under which the guardianship began. So would the fact that Harper had lived with me for virtually her entire remembered life. But the court could still examine whether Ashley had rehabilitated and what Harper wanted. That last part tightened something in my chest again. What Harper wants, I repeated. Daniel looked at me over the file. She's 13 and a half. No judge is going to treat her like a suitcase. The image hit harder than he intended. I had spent years insisting Harper was not something other adults could move around. Yet the moment she became old enough to have a meaningful voice, some part of me wanted the old simplicity back. I wanted her young enough that my judgment could cover everything. I did not say that. Instead, I asked what would happen next. Daniel said the court would likely want updated information and could appoint or use an investigator to interview everyone separately. Ashley's current stability would be examined. So would my guardianship. Harper could be interviewed without either of us in the room. Without me? Yes. My body reacted before my mind did. He noticed. Lauren, that is not a threat. It felt like one. I left his office with a list of documents to gather and a fear I did not know how to name without sounding selfish. I was not afraid Harper would suddenly decide Ashley was wonderful and leave with her after one conversation. I knew my daughter better than that. I was afraid of discovering there was a part of Harper's life I could not protect by being present. For 13 years, showing up had solved almost everything. Fever? I showed up. School meeting? I showed up. Broken friendship? Lost homework? First panic attack before a presentation? I showed up. Now, the process required me to step outside a room and let Harper speak about me, about Ashley, about her own life, with no way for me to correct anything. That was new. So I tightened my grip elsewhere. I told Harper that any questions about the case could wait until Daniel had explained things to me. When she asked what Ashley had written in her declaration, I gave her the softened version. Ashley said she had been in crisis, said she was stable now, and wanted the court to consider contact. Harper watched my face. What else? That's the main part. Mom, I hated how quickly she knew. There are adult accusations in there, I said. You don't need to read someone saying things about me just because she filed them. What things? That I kept you from her. Harper's eyes sharpened. Did you? No. The answer came too fast. She waited. I felt irritation rise, not at her, but at the fact that Ashley had managed to put a question into our house that had never lived there before. I didn't keep you from anyone who was trying to be here, I said. There were no calls to block, no visits to stop. That's not what I asked. I looked at her. Harper folded her arms. Did she ever try later? Like when I was little? I don't know of any real attempt. You don't know? No. She absorbed that. Then why can't I read what she says? Because I was afraid. Because I did not want Ashley's voice arriving in Harper's head before I had a chance to explain why it was wrong. Because I had spent 13 years being the person who translated danger into something my daughter could survive, and I did not know how to stop. What I said was, not yet. Harper's mouth tightened. That's not the same as no. She walked away again. 3 days later, Rebecca filed a request, asking the court to establish a structured path for contact while the guardianship review was pending. Her argument was simple enough to make me furious. Ashley could not demonstrate whether a relationship with Harper was possible if every attempt at contact had to pass through me, and I refused all of them. She did not need to prove I had blocked Ashley for 13 years. She only needed to point to what I was doing now. Daniel called me as soon as he received the filing. This is what I meant. I'm protecting her. I know. She showed up after $4.6 million. I know the timing. She talked about the estate in my house. I know that too. Then why are we acting like I'm the problem? We're not. We're acting like your conduct is part of the record now. I went quiet. That distinction hurt because it was true. Ashley had done something I had not expected. She had stopped arguing about the old night and adapted to the thing I had handed her in the present. The defense was no longer only that she had been a young mother in crisis. Now it was that she could not prove rehabilitation as a parent because I would not let her speak to Harper. Rebecca did not need Ashley to be innocent. She only needed my fear to be visible. The court assigned an investigator named Elena Ramirez to update the guardianship picture and report on the current family situation. Daniel warned me not to treat her like an ally or an enemy. She is not there to validate you. I'm aware. He gave me a look that suggested my tone had proved the opposite. Elena came to our house first. She was in her mid-40s, dressed simply, carrying a tablet instead of a dramatic file. She did not react when I showed her the guardianship order or when I described the original abandonment. She already had the filings. What she wanted was not a performance of how much I loved Harper. She wanted to know how we lived, who handled school decisions, what Harper's routine looked like, whether she had medical needs, how discipline worked, whether I had talked to Harper about Ashley's return, whether I had restricted contact. I answered honestly, until honesty became uncomfortable. Yes, I changed her phone settings. Why? I didn't want Ashley contacting her directly. Had Ashley tried? No, Did Harper ask you to block her? No. Elena typed something. The sound of her fingers on the tablet bothered me more than any accusation. I explained that Ashley had been absent for 13 years and returned in the same week she learned about a multi-million-dollar estate. Elena did not dismiss that. She asked whether Harper knew the amount. I said yes. She asked whether Harper knew why I was proposing an independent fiduciary. I said she understood the basic reason. Then Elena asked whether Harper had seen Ashley's petition. Not the whole thing. Why not? Because she's 13. Elena looked at me, not unkindly. She's also the person the petition is about. The sentence stayed with me. Elena interviewed Ashley separately. I was not there and did not pretend later that I knew every word. What I knew came from the process. Ashley provided proof of employment, housing, insurance, and the current life she claimed showed rehabilitation. She did not retract the fact that she had left Harper. She continued to describe that decision as a crisis placement she had failed to repair. For the first time, I understood why Rebecca's case could not simply be laughed out of court. Ashley was not asking a judge to believe she had been a good mother. She was asking the judge to believe that a woman who had been a bad mother at 25 might be capable of becoming something different at 38. I could hate her and still recognize that those were not the same question. Harper's interview happened the following week. Elena asked me to wait in the lobby of her office. I had waited outside rooms for Harper before. Dentist appointments when she was old enough to go back alone. A school counselor's office, after a friend betrayed her confidence. None of those waits felt like this one. There was a framed print of a river on the wall and a rack of outdated magazines. I read the same paragraph in a gardening magazine 6 times without understanding a word. 35 minutes later, Harper came out carrying her backpack. Her face gave me nothing. Elena asked to speak with me for a few minutes, after Harper sat in the outer office. She did not tell me everything Harper had said. She told me what I needed to know for the process. Harper wanted to remain living with me. The relief was so immediate and shameful that I had to hide it. She did not want the guardianship terminated, but she also did not want adults deciding what she was allowed to know about Ashley. I felt the relief vanish. Elena continued. Harper had asked whether she could hear Ashley's explanation without me in the room. Not because she trusted Ashley, not because she wanted a different mother, because she wanted to know what Ashley would say when I was not there to answer first. That was almost exactly what Harper had done at our dining table when she told me to let Ashley talk. I had heard the lesson once. I had not learned it. Elena's preliminary recommendation was not to change Harper's home or end the guardianship while the case was being reviewed. The existing stability mattered too much to disrupt casually. But if Harper agreed, limited structured contact could be appropriate so the court had something real to evaluate, instead of competing claims about a relationship that did not yet exist. My first response was no. I did not say it aloud, but it was there. Elena must have seen it. This is not a custody transfer, she said. It is contact Harper. Says she wants to try. I asked what structured meant. A neutral setting. Clear duration. No surprise pickup. No unsupervised overnight anything. No assumption of parental authority. The goal was to let Harper experience Ashley as a person, not to hand Ashley a title. Every safeguard made sense. My fear rejected all of them anyway. On the drive home, Harper stared out the passenger window until we were almost at our street. Then she said, I want to do one meeting. I kept my eyes on the road. You don't have to. I know. You can tell Elena you changed your mind. I know. You don't owe Ashley anything. I know that too. The repetition made me hear myself. Harper turned toward me. Mom, I'm not asking to move in with her. I didn't say you were. You're acting like if I talk to her without you there, something gets taken away from you. The words hurt because they found the fear exactly. I pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. For a few seconds, Neither of us moved. I spent a long time making sure nobody could make decisions about you without thinking about what was good for you, I said. Harper's voice softened. Then, let me be one of the people who thinks about what's good for me. I looked at her. She was 13 and a half, not 6 months, not 4 years old, asking why our last names were different, not 9 years old asking what guardian meant. I had built a life around the idea that she was safe because I was the person who knew when to step in. Now she was asking me to know when to step back. I'm scared, I admitted. Harper nodded. I know. It was the first time in the entire case that I said the fear plainly, instead of dressing it up as a rule. She did not promise me that Ashley would mean nothing to her. She did not promise she would hate the meeting or come home grateful for the life I had given her. She only said, I want to hear her once without everybody arguing. That was reasonable. Reasonable was terrifying. I told her I would not stop the meeting. The next morning I called Daniel and told him to notify Elena that I would cooperate with the structured contact. He was quiet for half a second. Good. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised. You are absolutely surprised. He ignored that. Lauren, this matters. Not because it makes Ashley right, because it keeps Harper's wishes from being confused with your fear. I looked through the kitchen doorway. Harper was at the table eating toast and pretending not to listen. For the first time since Ashley returned, the next door in the story was not one Ashley had forced open. Harper had chosen it herself, and I had agreed to let her walk through it. That evening, after I told Daniel I would cooperate with Harper's first structured meeting, I realized I had agreed to let my daughter walk into a room with information I still controlled. The thought bothered me more than the meeting itself. Harper knew the broad shape of how she had come to me. She knew Ashley had left her when she was a baby. She knew there had been a guardianship hearing, that Ryan had not taken custody, that Diane had disappeared from our lives, and that I had raised her from infancy. But I had edited the edges for years. I had never shown her Ashley's note. I had never repeated Diane's exact sentence. I had treated those details like broken glass, real, dangerous, and mine, to keep out of her hands, until I decided she was old enough. Now Ashley was about to sit across from her without me, in the room, and tell her own version. If I wanted Harper to judge that version for herself, I could not send her in carrying only the pieces I had chosen. I found her in her bedroom sitting cross-legged on the floor, with an open science notebook and 3 highlighters arranged in a row. She looked up when I knocked on the doorframe. "Can we talk?" Her eyes moved over my face before she nodded. I sat on the edge of her desk chair rather than the bed. I did not want the conversation to feel like bedtime reassurance. Harper put the cap back on a yellow highlighter and waited. "I've been deciding too much of what you're allowed to know," I said. She did not rush to make me feel better. I told her there were details about the night Ashley left her, that I had kept back because she had been too young at first, and later because I had convinced myself they would only hurt her. I said that distinction had made sense to me when she was 4 or 7. It made less sense now that adults were arguing in court about a history that belonged to her. Then I went to my room and brought back the clear folder I had been carrying through every stage of the case. I did not hand her the whole file. I took out the copy of the note. The paper had been flattened for 13 years. The fold down the middle was still visible. Ashley's handwriting looked almost casual compared with what the sentence had done to our lives. Harper took it by the corners. She read it once. "I can't do this anymore." Her face barely moved, but her thumb stopped against the edge of the page. "That was it?" "Yes." "No other page?" "No." She looked at me. Know where she was going? No. When she'd come back? No. I could see her making the same calculation I had made at 22. 1 baby, 1 bag, 1 sentence. I told her what had been in the diaper bag, not because the inventory itself mattered now, but because she deserved to know what I had actually seen. Enough formula and diapers for a short stretch, 2 changes of clothes, an insurance card copy, a blanket. No plan, no emergency number, no arrangement for what happened the next morning. Harper looked back down at the note. Did Grandma know? That question hurt before I answered it. She knew Ashley was overwhelmed. She knew Ashley was talking about needing a break. But did she know she left me with you? By the time I called her, yes. Harper waited. When I asked Diane to come help, I said, she told me, she's your burden now. Harper stared at me. For a few seconds, I heard the ceiling fan click with each rotation. Then she gave a small laugh that contained no humor. She said, burden? Yes. About me? Yes. My instinct rose instantly. Explain, Diane. Explain favoritism. Explain that Diane had always absorbed Ashley's excuses. Explain that Harper had never been a burden to me. Not once, not even when I was scared or exhausted. I stopped myself before I turned her pain into another speech. Harper put the note on the floor between us. You never told me that. No, because you thought I couldn't handle it? At first. And later? I forced myself not to choose a nicer word. Later, I got used to being the person who decided when you were ready. Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. That's exactly what I was mad about. I know. No, I mean not that you didn't tell me when I was 5. I get that, but I'm 13. Ashley came into our house and talked about my life, and you still kept deciding which parts I should hear. There was no defense that did not prove her point. So I said, you're right. Harper looked almost more unsettled by that than she would have been by an argument. I told her the rest plainly. Ryan had been located after the abandonment. He had declined custody. A formal support obligation eventually existed, and money came through the system. There had been no private relationship hidden from her, no secret visits, no birthday calls I had concealed. I also told her I could not truthfully prove Ashley had never tried in any way to find a path back because I did not know every place she had lived or every thought she had had. What I knew was that no meaningful attempt had reached me, the court, or Harper. And if she says you stopped her? Harper asked. I'll tell you what I know. Daniel can tell you what the record shows. Elena can tell you what the process allows. You don't have to use me as the only source anymore. That sentence cost me something. For 13 years, being the one who knew Harper's life had blended with being the one who loved her. Now loving her meant letting other people answer questions I could not control. Harper picked up Ashley's note again. Can I keep this tonight? My chest tightened. Then I reminded myself it was a copy. Yes. She put it inside her science notebook as if it were just another document she needed time to understand. Before I left, she said, I'm still going to the meeting. I know, and I don't want you thinking that means I believe her. I'm trying not to decide what it means before you do. That earned the faintest curve at one corner of her mouth. The meeting took place 4 days later in a counseling room Elena's office used for structured family contact. It was deliberately ordinary. 2 soft chairs, a small couch, a low table with a box of tissues, no judge, no lawyers at the table. Elena was nearby and available, but the point was not to stage a trial. It was to give Harper and Ashley 1 hour, in which neither Rebecca nor I could argue over the meaning of every sentence. I drove Harper there. The entire way I had to fight the urge to prepare her. If Ashley says this, remember that. If she minimizes the 13 years, ask her about the note. If she blames me, tell her I said none of it. Harper wore jeans, a gray sweatshirt, and the expression she used before school presentations, not frightened enough to admit fear, not relaxed enough to fool me. At the building entrance, she said, You're going to be here, right? In the lobby. The whole time? The whole time. She nodded. That was the only reassurance she asked for. Ashley arrived 5 minutes later without Rebecca. I had seen her composed beside a lawyer and across my dining table. This was different. She carried no folder. She had a paper coffee cup in one hand. and kept switching it from one hand to the other. When Harper came out of the lobby to meet Elena, Ashley stood too quickly. For a moment, the three of us were within 10 feet of one another. Ashley looked at me. I expected challenge. Instead, she looked scared. That frightened me more. Elena took Harper and Ashley down the hall. The door closed. I sat in the lobby with a magazine I never opened. An hour is not long until your child is spending it with the mother who left her. I pictured Harper hearing a version of the past in which I was the obstacle. I even pictured Ashley saying something true I had never considered. That was the hardest possibility. When the door finally opened, Harper came out first. Her face was flushed around the eyes. But she was not crying. Ashley followed several steps behind. Her own eyes were red. Neither woman looked victorious. Elena spoke briefly to each of them. Then Ashley left through the side exit so Harper and I would not have to share the parking lot with her. I waited until we were in the car before I asked, "Do you want quiet or questions?" "Food." That answer was so normal that I almost laughed. We stopped at a small sandwich place 2 blocks away. Harper ordered fries and ate 6 before saying anything about the meeting. She apologized. I did not ask whether the apology sounded sincere. What did she apologize for? For leaving me? For not coming back? For making you handle everything? That last part surprised me. Harper dragged a fry through ketchup. She didn't say it like she suddenly understands all 13 years. She said she knew saying sorry doesn't fix it. I nodded. She also didn't ask me to call her mom. I had not realized I was holding tension in my shoulders until some of it released. Harper noticed. She said she knows your mom. That hurt in a completely different way. Not because Ashley had said it, because a part of me felt relief that she had. I hated that I needed acknowledgement from the person whose absence had made the word possible. Harper kept talking. Ashley had answered questions about where she had lived, how she had ended up working in property management, why she had never called. Her answers were not clean. She said the first year had been chaos and shame. Then she became embarrassed by how long she had waited. Each year made the first call harder. Eventually, she built a life in which not calling was easier than facing what the call might require. Did you believe her? I asked. Harper considered the question. Some of it. The same answer she had given after the meeting at our house. This time it scared me more. What part? That she was ashamed. I looked down at my untouched sandwich. Harper said, I asked her why shame lasted 13 years. I looked back up. What did she say? That it didn't. She said after a while it was just cowardice. I had spent years calling Ashley selfish, unreliable, absent. I had never expected her to use a word that harsh about herself. Did she blame me? I asked before I could stop myself. Harper gave me a look. Sorry. She said she thought you hated her. I did. I know. She said she thought if she came back you'd tell her to leave. I waited. Harper wiped salt from her fingers. I asked whether she ever actually tried. And? She said no. That answer removed one of the arguments I had been preparing for weeks. No lost letters, no secret campaign of blocked contact, just fear, shame, avoidance, and finally, a life built around absence. It did not make her choice smaller. It made it more human. That was harder to dismiss. On the drive home, Harper watched trees pass outside the window. Near our neighborhood, she said, I think I want to do another one. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I had known this was possible. Elena had warned me that one meeting could lead to another if Harper wanted it. Knowing did not protect me from the physical response. Heat moved up my neck. My heartbeat turned heavy. Every instinct told me to ask what Ashley had said that made Harper want more. Instead, I said, okay. Harper turned toward me. I kept driving. That's it? She asked. What do you want me to say? I don't know. I thought you'd need a minute. I need several. That made her smile despite herself. Then I added, but needing a minute isn't the same as saying no. She grew serious again. I don't want to live with her. I know. I just want to see if she says the same things next time. She was not looking for a replacement mother. She was testing consistency. An apology could be rehearsed once. Respect was harder to rehearse over time. I think that makes sense, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Harper reached over and adjusted the air vent toward herself. You know what was weird? What? She asked me what music I like. I waited for the problem. There isn't one, Harper said. That's why it was weird. I understood. At our dining table, Ashley had arrived speaking about rights, guardianship, property, authority. In the neutral room, with no lawyer beside her and no access to negotiate, she had asked her daughter about music. That scared me in a way greed never could. If Ashley was capable of ordinary curiosity, there might be something real mixed in with everything else. The second contact happened the following week. I did not sit in the lobby counting minutes this time. I dropped Harper off, walked to a coffee shop across the street, answered 3 work emails, and managed to drink half a cup before checking the clock. I did not ask Harper for a transcript afterward. She volunteered only what mattered. Ashley had remembered the name of the band Harper mentioned. She had brought no gift. She had asked about school, a friend Harper had mentioned, and whether the art teacher Harper liked was the same teacher connected to an upcoming school event. Then, near the end, Ashley had asked one question that changed the temperature slightly. She asked who's handling all the stuff from Ryan. Harper told me while we drove home. I kept my eyes ahead. What did you say? That Judith is supposed to. Anything else? She asked if Judith decides everything. What did you say? That I don't really know yet. And then, she said okay and changed the subject. I waited for Harper to tell me what she thought. She did not. I did not tell her what to think. That was harder than it sounds. One money question did not erase an hour of appropriate behavior. It also did not disappear simply because Ashley had asked it gently. The pattern Harper had noticed at our table was quieter now. Too quiet to call proof, too present to ignore. That evening, Daniel called after speaking with Elena about the contact schedule. He said my cooperation mattered. The present record was beginning to look different from the one Rebecca had tried to build when I was blocking everything. Harper was choosing contact. I was facilitating it. Ashley could still argue about history, but it was getting harder to say I was preventing a current relationship from forming. For the first time in weeks, something in the legal case had changed because I had loosened my grip instead of tightening it. The result felt backward. Control had protected Harper 13 years earlier because no one else was making responsible decisions. But using the same instinct forever could turn protection into something else. Harper came into the kitchen carrying her backpack and dropped it beside the table. Elena asked if I want to keep the meetings going. I looked at her. She was not asking permission in the old way. She was telling me the decision she was trying to make and watching to see whether I would respect that it belonged partly to her. What did you tell her? Harper sat across from me. I want to keep seeing her for now. The phrase for now mattered. It was not forgiveness. It was not custody. It was not a promise. It was a 13-year-old girl choosing to leave one door open while she decided what was on the other side. I breathed in, then out. Okay. Harper searched my face. Really? Really? She might disappoint me. I know. She might be lying about some things. I know. And I might decide I don't want to see her later. That's yours to decide too. Something in her shoulders relaxed. Mine did not. But that was not her job. The next morning, Daniel called before I left for work. He had spoken with Martin's office about the estate proceeding. If I wanted the separation between Harper and the money to be more than something I said when Ashley accused me, we needed to formalize it now. Judith's appointment could not remain a vague intention floating beside the custody fight. Daniel put it plainly. If I supported an independent professional to control Harper's estate, I would be voluntarily stepping away from $4.6 million that I could have asked the court to let me manage. I looked through the kitchen doorway. Harper was standing at the counter spreading peanut butter on toast, her hair still damp from the shower. The same girl Ashley now wanted to know. The same girl Ryan had left everything to. The same girl I had spent 13 years calling mine in every way that mattered. For most of those years, protecting her had meant taking responsibility when other people would not. Now protecting her was about to require the opposite. I had to give up control before anyone could confuse control with love. The next time I met Judith Hale, I understood why Daniel had been pushing me to formalize the separation instead of simply promising I would stay out of Harper's inheritance. Judith did not look like someone who had spent her career around large estates. She wore a plain gray blazer, carried a tablet, and spoke about $4.6 million with the same tone my mechanic used when explaining why a belt needed replacing. No awe. No suggestion that Harper's life had suddenly become glamorous. Just obligations, restrictions, accounting, and the fact that money belonging to a minor had to be managed for the minor. Martin joined us by video from his office. Daniel sat beside me. Harper was at school. Judith walked me through what her role would actually mean if the court appointed her. She would take control of estate assets once probate transferred them into the protected arrangement. She would keep records, file accountings, invest under the standards that applied to fiduciaries, and seek or document approval for expenses, depending on what the court required. I would remain the person making Harper's ordinary daily decisions, under the guardianship of her person. If Harper had a legitimate expense connected to her education, health, or welfare that should come from the estate, I could request it. Judith would not be my banker, and I would not be able to treat Harper's inheritance like an extension of my checking account. I found the description comforting. Then Judith said something that made the cost of my choice more concrete. If you support my appointment, she said, you should understand that you are also giving up the convenience of direct control. I nodded. She did not let me get away with a symbolic nod. She asked whether I understood that I would have to document requests, that I might disagree with her judgment, and that the money would not automatically be available because I believed an expense was good for Harper. She asked whether I had any expectation that the estate would reimburse me for 13 years of raising Harper. No. Any unpaid loans to Ryan? No. Any agreement with him that you would be compensated from his estate? No. Daniel glanced at me only once. Judith asked whether I intended to change Harper's school, housing, or lifestyle because of the inheritance. No. That answer came easiest. For 13 years, Harper and I had lived within what I earned and what formal support provided. I was not about to teach her that grief had converted into an upgrade package. When the meeting ended, Daniel slid a declaration toward me. It stated, in far more formal language than I would ever use at home, that I supported an independent professional fiduciary and was not seeking appointment as guardian of Harper's estate. The signature line waited at the bottom. I thought about what Ashley had said at my dining table. Why should a stranger control my daughter's money? For once, the answer felt simple. Because the money belonged to Harper, and the safest person to manage it was someone who did not need anything else from her. I signed. The strange part was how ordinary the pen felt in my hand. 13 years earlier, signing guardianship paperwork had meant taking control because nobody else would. This signature meant giving control away on purpose. Daniel collected the pages. That helps us, he said. I almost laughed. I'm not doing it to help the case. I know. That's why it helps. A week later, Elena's first written update after the structured contacts arrived. Daniel called me during my lunch break instead of forwarding the whole thing without warning. He summarized what mattered. Harper continued to say she wanted to live with me and did not want the guardianship ended. She also wanted the option to keep seeing Ashley. I had transported her to the meetings, provided information when asked, and had not interfered with the sessions. Elena noted that my earlier efforts to restrict contact had been real, but so was the change in my behavior. The sentence that mattered most was not flattering to me or cruel to Ashley. It was simply current. There was no present evidence that I was preventing Harper from communicating with her biological mother. I leaned back in my office chair. For weeks, Ashley's strongest argument had been built from my own fear. She could say she could not prove she had changed because I would not let her close enough to try. Now Harper had chosen the door open. I had stopped standing in it. Ashley could still argue that the past was complicated. She could still say she had rehabilitated. She could still ask the court to consider what biological parenthood meant now. But she could no longer point to the present and say I was making a relationship impossible. I expected relief. What I felt instead was exposure. Once I removed myself as the obstacle, there was nothing between Ashley and the thing she claimed to want, except Harper's own pace. That made the next several weeks more revealing than another argument ever could have been. The contact did not turn into instant closeness. Harper did not start texting Ashley all day or asking to spend weekends with her. She saw her in the structured setting, sometimes sent a short message through the approved channel, and kept evaluating. Ashley mostly behaved well. That sentence still made me uncomfortable. She remembered things Harper told her. She stopped bringing up the old crisis unless Harper asked. She did not show up with expensive gifts. When Harper mentioned an art showcase at school, Ashley asked if she was allowed to attend rather than announcing that she would. Harper came to me 2 nights before the event. Ashley wants to come Thursday. I was folding towels on the couch. I kept folding. What do you want? I think it's okay. I lined up the edges of a towel that did not need that much attention. Then I think it's okay. Harper watched me. What? You didn't make a face. I'm trying to grow as a person. You look like it hurts. It does. She laughed. The art showcase took place in the school multipurpose room, where folding display boards covered 3 walls, and parents wandered around holding paper cups of lemonade. Harper had a charcoal drawing in the 8th grade section, a row of apartment balconies seen from below, all hard lines and shadows. She had worked on it for weeks without letting me see the finished version. Ashley arrived alone. No Rebecca, no folder, no attempt to take over. For the first 20 minutes, she did exactly what any parent trying not to embarrass a teenager would do. She stood back when Harper talked with friends. She asked about the drawing. She listened when Harper explained why one balcony was intentionally empty. I hated how normal it looked. Then one of Harper's classmates came over with her mother. Harper introduced us without hesitation. This is my mom, Lauren. The other mother smiled at me. Harper gestured toward Ashley. And this is Ashley. It happened fast enough that nobody outside our little circle would have noticed anything. Ashley did. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes changed. I felt sympathy before I could stop myself. She had given birth to Harper, and in the language Harper used for her own life, Ashley's name had become the title. Not Mom. Ashley. I would have understood if she needed a moment. What mattered was what she did with it. She said hello to the other mother, asked Harper another question about the drawing, and stayed through the rest of the showcase without making the introduction into a scene. On the drive home, I told Harper I thought Ashley had handled it well. Harper looked surprised. What? I'm allowed to notice when she does something right. I know. I just didn't think you'd say it first. Neither had I. The next day, Ashley sent Harper a short message, thanking her for inviting her. She did not mention the introduction. 2 days after that, Rebecca contacted Daniel. Ashley wanted to know why, if the relationship was progressing, she could not be added as an approved contact at Harper's school and included in medical decision communications. Not custody, not yet. A role. Daniel explained that the existing guardianship gave me legal decision-making authority and that Harper's current willingness to have contact did not automatically expand Ashley's authority. Rebecca framed the request as a reasonable next step for a rehabilitated parent. I asked Harper how she felt before I gave Daniel any response. She frowned at her cereal. I don't want that. Why? I don't know her like that yet. The answer was so simple I almost missed how important it was. Harper was willing to sit in a room with Ashley. She was willing to invite her to a school event. She was not willing to hand her decisions. Access and authority were not the same thing to Harper. I told Daniel. That was our position. Ashley did not challenge Harper directly. She did not send an angry message. Through Rebecca, she accepted that the request would not be agreed to voluntarily at that point. But something shifted afterward. The questions became more structural. If Harper had a medical issue, who would notify Ashley? If school placement changed, would Ashley be consulted? If Judith was appointed over the estate, would Ashley receive accountings or information? Each question could be defended on its own. A biological mother trying to rebuild a role would naturally want to know what place she had. What bothered me was the speed. Harper was still deciding whether she trusted Ashley enough for a third month of contact. Ashley was already asking what authority came with the relationship. That difference became impossible to ignore when Daniel called me late on a Wednesday afternoon. Rebecca sent a framework. The word framework sounded harmless. It was not. Daniel emailed it while we were on the phone and told me not to react to the first paragraph. I reacted to the first paragraph. The proposal was written as an attempt to reduce conflict and avoid prolonged litigation. Ashley would consider narrowing or suspending her immediate effort to terminate my guardianship if we agreed to a phased expansion of her parental role. So far, that sounded like something lawyers did. Then I kept reading. The framework proposed that Ashley receive formal participation in major educational and medical decisions. It also proposed that her position as biological mother be recognized in the estate proceeding, including support for her involvement in decisions concerning distributions for Harper's care, and consideration of her for an estate management role if the guardianship of the person changed. The wording was careful. It did not say hand Ashley $4.6 million. It did not say give her a debit card. It did not even say remove Judith immediately. It connected legal piece to authority, person authority, property authority. I read the page twice. She'll back off trying to end the guardianship if I give her more decision-making and support her getting into the estate structure. Daniel paused. That is the practical shape of it, yes. I stood up from my desk and closed my office door. She already gets to see Harper. Yes. Harper wants to keep seeing her. Yes. I'm not blocking that. No. So what part of knowing her daughter requires any of this? That, Daniel said, is the question you should hold on to. I walked to the window. Below me, delivery trucks were backing into loading bays behind the distribution center. Their warning beeps came through the glass in faint, regular bursts. A month earlier, I would have called the framework proof that Ashley had come back for the money. Now I knew better than to turn a pattern into a verdict before the pattern finished. Ashley might genuinely want Harper. She might genuinely believe that being a mother without authority was humiliating. She might believe the estate should be managed by family rather than a professional stranger. Entitlement did not have to feel like greed from the inside. That did not make the demand safer. Daniel asked whether I wanted him to reject the proposal. My first instinct was yes. Immediate, clean, protective, the old answer. Then I pictured Harper in her bedroom telling me she was tired of being the last person to learn what adults were deciding about her. No, I said. Daniel went quiet. I'm not saying accept it. I assumed. I'm saying don't answer yet. What do you want to do? I want Harper to understand what they're asking. He reminded me that Harper was 13, not a client, and should not be made responsible for negotiating litigation. I know. I don't want her negotiating. I want her informed. There was a difference, and this time I intended to respect it. That evening, I did not put the proposal in a locked drawer. I also did not drop 7 pages of lawyer language on the kitchen table and tell Harper to solve the adults. I called Daniel from home with Harper sitting beside me. He explained the proposal in plain language. Ashley was saying that if her legal role in Harper's life expanded, including a bigger voice in important decisions and a possible role connected to the estate, she might reduce the effort to end the guardianship. Immediately, Harper sat very still. So, she wants you to give her something so she stops trying to take me away? Daniel corrected the wording gently. It was a settlement proposal, not a ransom demand. Ashley's side would say the idea was to recognize her parental status and reduce conflict. Harper looked at me. What do you think? Every muscle in my body wanted to answer first. I did not. I think the money should stay separate from who gets to love you, I said. But I want you to understand the choices before I tell Daniel what to do. Harper turned back to the phone. If Mom says no, can I still see Ashley? Yes, Daniel said. Nothing in Lauren's refusal would require you to stop voluntary contact. That changed Harper's expression. And if Mom says yes? Daniel explained that some parts would still require court approval and formal orders. Nobody could simply sign away the estate. But agreeing would support giving Ashley more legal authority than she had now. Harper looked toward the hallway, thinking. Then she asked the question I had been trying not to ask too early. If she can already see me, why does she need the money part? Daniel did not answer motive for Ashley. Neither did I. He only said the two issues did not have to be linked. After the call, Harper stayed at the table. I don't want to decide court stuff. You don't have to. I want to decide who I see. That part is yours as much as the court allows it to be. And I don't want anybody using the inheritance to decide where I live. My throat tightened. Neither do I. She rubbed her palms against the knees of her jeans. I still want to see Ashley. I know. Are you mad? No. That answer was true. I was afraid. I was suspicious. I was tired enough that some mornings I woke with my jaw aching from grinding my teeth. But I was not angry at Harper for leaving a door open. That mattered. The next day, Daniel and I went through the framework line by line. This time, I did tell him what I wanted. Judith stayed independent. No agreement giving Ashley estate management authority in exchange for reducing custody pressure. No expanded decision-making authority that Harper had already said she was not ready for. No payment to Ashley. No reimbursement from Harper's estate for Ashley's legal expenses. But I did not want to block the relationship. If Harper wanted contact to continue, I would support a structured path for that to happen. Daniel leaned back in his chair. You realize what that does. What? It separates the two things completely. I looked at him. For months, Ashley had talked as though motherhood, custody, authority, and estate control were parts of one package. I had helped her make that argument stronger when I blocked contact. Because then she could say every form of authority was necessary just to reach Harper. Now that excuse was disappearing. Harper could know Ashley. Ashley could show up. Ashley could apologize, ask about music, attend an art show, and build whatever relationship Harper was willing to build. None of that required control over Ryan's money. I felt something settle inside me. Not certainty. A plan. Draft the counter-proposal, I said. Daniel picked up his pen. What do you want it to say? I thought about the school showcase. Harper introducing me as Mom and Ashley by her first name. Ashley swallowing the hurt and staying. That version of Ashley was someone Harper might choose to know. Then I thought about the framework waiting on Daniel's desk, where legal peace came attached to authority over decisions and money. Tell her she can have the chance to build a relationship, I said. But she doesn't get the inheritance with it. For the first time since Ashley came back, the next move would not test whether I could keep her away. It would test whether Harper, by herself, was enough. Daniel sent the counter-proposal to Rebecca. Might hurry you one. Before he did, he asked me one last time, whether I wanted to change anything. I read the final page at my kitchen table while Harper ate cereal across from me, and for the first time since Ashley returned, the document did not make my heart race. It said what I had finally learned to separate in my own head. Harper could continue seeing Ashley at the pace Harper chose. Ashley could receive appropriate updates if Harper was comfortable with that. The guardianship of Harper's person would remain in place while the court finished its review. Judith would manage the estate independently. There would be no payment to Ashley, no promise of an estate roll, and no exchange of Harper's money for peace in the custody case. I did not ask Harper to approve the document. She was 13, not my co-counsel. But I did tell her what it meant before Daniel sent it. The question was no longer whether Ashley could see her. That door was already open. The question was whether seeing Harper had to come with authority over her school, medical decisions, or inheritance. Harper listened, then looked down at the spoon in her hand. "I still want to decide if I see her," she said. "You can keep telling Elena what you want. And the money stays with Judith?" "If the court appoints her, yes. Ashley can ask the court for something different, but she doesn't get control just because she's your biological mother." Harper nodded slowly. There was no flash of triumph in her face. If anything, she looked tired. "Good. I don't want her using Dad's money to decide where I live." That was not a legal argument. It was a boundary. I did not polish it into anything stronger. Daniel sent the proposal. For 2 days, nothing happened. That silence felt different from Ashley's old silence. 13 years earlier, silence had meant she was gone. Now it meant lawyers were reading, clients were deciding, and choices were being turned into paper. I went to work. Harper went to school. I approved payroll corrections, signed a vendor report, remembered to buy laundry detergent, and tried not to check my phone every 6 minutes. The ordinary parts of life had become the only places where the case could not demand an answer from me. Rebecca responded late on the 3rd afternoon. She did not reject everything. That would have been easier. She acknowledged that continued contact could be useful, and that Harper's comfort mattered. But Ashley would not agree that the existing guardianship should simply remain while she was confined to a relationship with no corresponding legal role. Rebecca asked for a call with Daniel and me present, so there would be no misunderstanding about what Ashley was seeking. The call happened the next day. Ashley joined from Rebecca's office. I could hear the difference between the woman who had sat nervously in Elena's waiting area before seeing Harper and the woman who spoke through a lawyer's conference line. She was controlled again. Not cold exactly. Prepared. Rebecca began by saying, Ashley appreciated that contact was no longer being blocked. She also said, a rehabilitated parent could reasonably believe reunification meant more than supervised or voluntary visits, while another adult retained every significant decision and a professional fiduciary controlled the child's estate. Ashley was willing to proceed gradually, but she was not willing to accept a structure that treated her as a permanent visitor. I let Daniel answer the legal part. He repeated that contact and legal authority were separate issues, and that Harper's current wishes did not support ending the guardianship or expanding Ashley's decision-making role simply because meetings had gone well. He also made clear that Judith's independence was intentional. The estate did not belong to either mother figure. Ashley cut in only once. You keep calling me a mother figure. Daniel had meant function, not title, but I understood what she heard. No one is denying biology, I said before I could stop myself. There was a short silence. Ashley's voice came back lower. Biology is the only part of this nobody can erase. The old version of me would have listed 13 years of things biology had not done. I would have told her who stayed awake with fevers, who learned Harper's teachers, who knew how she took her grilled cheese, who could tell from the way she closed a bedroom door whether she needed company or space. I could feel all of it rise in me. Then I remembered the purpose of the call. It was not to win the word mother. So what are you asking for that seeing Harper doesn't give you? I asked. Ashley answered without hesitation. She wanted recognition in major decisions. She wanted a path toward ending the guardianship, not maintaining it indefinitely. And she wanted to be heard regarding the estate, because, in her words, a parent should not be treated like an unrelated outsider while a stranger managed her child's financial future. Rebecca tried to narrow it. She said the estate question could be handled through the proper proceeding and did not have to be resolved on that call. Ashley kept going anyway. If I prove I'm stable enough to be part of her life, why am I automatically not stable enough to have any say in what happens to what her father left her? There it was again. Ashley was not asking for a check. She was treating motherhood as a bundle of rights, with access, legal authority, and estate control belonging together. That was the logic that frightened me. Daniel ended the call without turning it into a debate. The clean proposal remained available. Ashley could keep building the relationship Harper had chosen. Nothing about our position required her to stop seeing Harper. But we would not agree to transfer legal authority or support an estate management role merely to make the guardianship fight go away. Rebecca said she understood. Ashley said nothing. A week later, Daniel called me at work and told me Ashley had made her choice. The filing was not dramatic. It was worse than dramatic because it was formal. Ashley had objected to Judith's proposed appointment and asked to be considered for a court-supervised role in managing Harper's estate if the court changed or terminated the guardianship of Harper's person. Her papers emphasized that she was Harper's biological mother, that she had demonstrated current stability, and that excluding her from both parental decision-making and property management treated rehabilitation as meaningless. She did not claim the estate belonged to her. She did not claim she could spend it however she wanted. She asked the court to give her fiduciary authority over money that belonged to Harper. I sat with the phone against my ear and stared at the monthly close calendar pinned beside my monitor. For months, I had wondered whether I was unfairly attaching greed to bad timing. Ashley had returned after learning about the estate, but timing alone was not proof. She had apologized to Harper. She had remembered her music. She had sat through a school art show and swallowed the pain of being introduced by her first name. All of that could still be true. So could this. The important change was that I no longer had to guess whether money belonged in Ashley's plan. Ashley had put it there herself. What happens now? I asked. Daniel said we would oppose the request and support Judith. The estate proceeding would remain supervised. Ashley's biological relationship did not make her automatically entitled to appointment, and Judith's lack of personal stake was one of her strengths. But Daniel also reminded me not to narrate the filing as a confession it was not. Ashley would say she was asking for responsibility, not access to cash. I know, I said, and I did. Before we ended the call, Daniel asked whether I wanted him to reopen the settlement discussion before we filed our opposition. He did not recommend giving Ashley the estate role. He was doing his job, making sure I understood that litigation had a price, and that saying no could mean more months of fees and uncertainty. A few weeks earlier, that uncertainty might have pushed me toward any agreement that kept Harper in my house. I could see the temptation clearly now. Give Ashley a little title. Give her a little authority. Call it compromise. Pay for certainty with pieces of Harper's future. No, I said. Oppose it. Daniel did not congratulate me. He simply said, "All right." That mattered too. This was not a heroic gesture. I was choosing the more expensive, less certain road, because the cheaper one required bargaining with authority that did not belong to me. Harper had already told us what she wanted. The freedom to decide whether she knew Ashley, and no financial control attached to that relationship. I could not teach her that her voice mattered, and then trade around it because I was tired. The danger was not that Ashley had written, "I want Harper's money." The danger was that she had been offered Harper without the money, and had decided the offer was incomplete. That evening, I told Harper there had been a new filing. I did not put the legal pages in front of her before dinner. I asked if she wanted the short version from me or the plain language version from Daniel later. Short version first. Ashley is objecting to Judith and asking the court to consider her for a role managing your estate if the guardianship changes. Harper stopped twisting spaghetti around her fork. She wants to manage it? She wants the court to consider her. She would still have rules, oversight, accounting. It wouldn't become her money. I know it wouldn't become her money. I waited. She looked down at her plate. I just don't get why she needs to be the person. I could have answered with every suspicion I had collected since Ashley's first message. Instead, I said, "That's something she'll have to explain." Harper's eyes came back to mine. She knew what I was doing. Not protecting Ashley, not protecting myself. Leaving the question where it belonged. "Can I still see her?" she asked. "Yes." The answer came easily now. Harper nodded once. "Then I want to keep doing that for now." There was courage in that choice that I had almost mistaken for softness. She was not excusing Ashley. She was refusing to let a court filing make a personal decision for her. I told Elena the same thing when she checked in later that week. Harper wanted the relationship experiment to continue. The estate filing had not changed that by itself. The next contact was scheduled at the same neutral office where the earlier meetings had taken place. By then, Harper no longer needed me to walk her all the way to Elena's door. I drove her there, watched her sling her backpack over one shoulder, and stayed in the lobby with my laptop open on my knees. She came back out 27 minutes later. The meeting was supposed to last an hour. Harper's face was pale, in a way that made me close the laptop before she reached me. "Are you okay? I want to go." I stood immediately. Elena came out behind her and told me the meeting had ended at Harper's request. She did not give me a blow-by-blow in the hallway. She only said Harper had set a boundary and wanted to leave. Ashley would exit separately after a few minutes. In the car, I did not start the engine right away. "Home?" I asked. Harper nodded. I pulled out of the parking lot. We were halfway to the main road when she spoke. She started talking about where I would live if the guardianship ended. I kept my eyes on traffic. What did she say? Harper picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. Ashley had apparently begun carefully. She said she did not expect Harper to move overnight, and that any change would take time. She talked about making room in her apartment, maybe moving somewhere with a second bedroom, being closer to Harper's school if that became necessary. That alone had not made Harper end the meeting. Then Ashley said that if they were eventually together as a family, decisions would not have to go through so many other people. She said Ryan had left Harper enough that they could make choices about school, college, housing, and a future without being limited in the same way ordinary families were. Harper looked out the passenger window. She said it like the inheritance was part of us living together. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, but I kept my voice level. "What did you say?" I told her I don't want to talk about the estate when I'm there to see her. That sounded exactly like Harper. Short, specific. "What did she say?" Harper's mouth flattened. "She asked if you told me to say that." I felt the old anger come up so fast it was almost clean. Not because Ashley disagreed with the boundary, because she could not imagine Harper owning it. I took a breath before asking, "And then?" I said no. She said she was just worried you were making me afraid of things I don't understand. Harper looked at me then. "So," I told her, "I understand that the money is mine and Judith is supposed to manage it. I understand she wants a role. I understand I'm allowed to not want that." There was no legal flourish in the words. Just 13-year-old exhaustion. Ashley had apparently tried to explain that she was not asking to take anything from Harper. She wanted to protect what Ryan had left and make sure outsiders did not make decisions without family input. Harper had repeated the boundary. No estate talk during visits. Ashley asked again whether Lauren had put that rule in her head. Harper ended the meeting. For a few miles, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the only question that mattered. "Do you want to stop seeing her?" Harper shook her head, then changed it to a shrug. I don't know. I waited. I don't want the next meeting scheduled yet, she said. I want to decide later. Okay, that was all. No lecture about how Ashley had finally shown her true colors. No relief disguised as concern. No suggestion that Harper should punish her. I had spent months learning that a boundary only belonged to Harper if I did not grab it and use it as a weapon. At home, she went straight to her room. An hour later, she came back out and asked if we had any ice cream. The question was so ordinary that I nearly cried. We ate it at the kitchen counter. Harper did not talk about Ashley again that night. The next morning, Elena called me. She had already documented that Harper ended the session voluntarily after asking Ashley not to discuss the estate and feeling that the boundary was not respected. Elena was careful not to tell me what conclusion she would ultimately reach. One bad contact did not erase Ashley's earlier appropriate behavior. One filing did not prove every motive I feared, but circumstances had changed enough that she wanted updated interviews before issuing her next report. Ashley's estate request had altered the case. Harper's reaction to it had altered the relationship. And Harper's refusal to schedule another meeting immediately meant access could no longer be treated as something that would simply expand with time. Daniel called that afternoon after speaking with Rebecca and reviewing the estate papers. He sounded tired. Rebecca understands the problem, he said. I knew better than to hear that as Rebecca changing sides. She's still representing Ashley. Yes, and Ashley is still asking for the estate role. Yes. Daniel explained that the court would now have to look at two tracks Ashley herself had chosen to keep alive: her request to end or change the guardianship of Harper's person, and her attempt to displace or enter the independent structure around Harper's property. Elena's updated work would matter to the first. Judith's independence and Ashley's formal filing would matter to the second. The case was no longer built around whether I had blocked Ashley. I had stopped. It was no longer built around whether Harper was willing to know her. She had been. Now the record contained a different question. Ashley had been given access to the girl without authority over the girl's money. Instead of letting the legal fight shrink, she had expanded it. I sat at my kitchen table after Harper went to bed and looked at the copy of the new filing Daniel had sent. Months earlier, I would have wanted one sentence that proved everything. A text saying Ashley wanted money. A witness who had overheard a plan. Some clean piece of evidence that would let me stop being afraid. There was no such sentence. There was something stronger and messier. A sequence of choices. Ashley came back. Harper opened the door. I stopped blocking it. Judith took the money out of my hands. Ashley was offered a path to know her daughter anyway. Then Ashley asked the court for the money roll. The following week, Elena scheduled the updated interviews, and the court placed the matter on a path toward final review. No one promised what the judge would decide. No one said Ashley had already lost. She was still stable, still Harper's biological mother, still entitled to make the arguments she had filed. But for the first time, she would have to make those arguments without using me as the reason she could not simply know her daughter. Harper had said yes to being known. She had said no to being controlled. Ashley now had to decide whether she could tell the difference. Elena's updated interviews began with Harper, which meant I spent another afternoon in a waiting room trying not to turn the closed door into a threat. This time I was better at it. Not good. Better. I brought my laptop and answered emails. I even made it almost 20 minutes before I caught myself staring at the same spreadsheet cell. The anxiety was still there, but I no longer treated my discomfort as evidence that Harper was in danger. When Harper came out, she looked tired but not shaken. Elena asked me to step into the office afterward while Harper waited outside. She did not repeat Harper's private words. She told me only what belonged to the process. Harper still wanted to live with me. She still did not want the guardianship of her person terminated. She had not changed her mind because one contact with Ashley had gone badly. She was not asking the court to punish Ashley or declare her incapable of ever having a relationship. What had changed was Harper's willingness to let that relationship expand on anyone else's schedule. She wanted control over whether there was another meeting and when. Elena also made a point I had not expected to hear from a neutral investigator. Ashley's current stability was real. She had a job. She had housing. She had shown she could arrive on time, behave appropriately in several contacts, listen to Harper, and tolerate some painful moments without making a scene. There was no evidence she was dangerous, intoxicated, violent, or incapable of caring for herself. I felt my shoulders tighten anyway, Elena noticed. "This isn't a recommendation to move Harper," she said. I nodded. She continued in the same measured tone. "A person could become more stable and still not be the right person to uproot a 13-year-old from the only home she remembered. Rehabilitation mattered. So did the relationship that actually existed. So did the child's age, attachments, wishes, school, routines, and the fact that Harper had lived under the guardianship for almost her entire life. The updated report would reflect both truths. Ashley was not the woman she had been at 25. Harper still did not want to live with her. For months, I had treated those statements as if one had to destroy the other. Hearing Elena place them side by side changed the shape of the fear. Ashley did not have to be a monster for the court to decide that ending the guardianship was not in Harper's best interest. That mattered more than I wanted to admit. When Harper and I left Elena's office, I did not tell her what I hoped the report would say. I asked if she wanted lunch. She said she wanted tacos, and no legal conversation for at least 45 minutes. I honored both requests. 2 days later, Daniel called with a written update. He did not read it to me. He confirmed the written report matched what Elena had already told me. Ashley's stability was real. Harper remained securely attached to our home. I was cooperating with contact, and Harper herself had paused future meetings after her no-estate boundary was not respected. The recommendation did not call Ashley evil. It did something more useful. It said there was no child-centered reason to terminate the guardianship, simply to reward a parent for becoming more stable years later. If Harper wanted contact, contact could continue. If Harper wanted distance, that mattered too. Her home did not need to be dismantled to prove Ashley had changed. I sat at my desk with one hand over my mouth. Daniel waited. "Say something," I told him. "I'm waiting for you to breathe." I looked at the employee calendar on my monitor and realized he was right. For months, I had lived as if one wrong sentence, one good meeting between Ashley and Harper, or one sympathetic explanation of the past could make 13 years disappear. Elena's report did not guarantee anything. Daniel reminded me of that before I could convert relief into certainty. The judge would decide. Ashley could challenge parts of the report. Rebecca could examine how Elena reached her conclusions. But the risk had changed. The question was no longer whether Ashley looked respectable enough to be taken seriously. She did. The question was whether ending Harper's existing home served Harper. On that question, the record had become much clearer. The estate side changed at almost the same time. Judith's proposed management plan went through the review process with Martin's office and the court handling Harper's protected property. I did not understand every accounting rule, and for once I did not feel compelled to. What mattered was straightforward. Judith had no stake in who won the guardianship fight. She would be paid for professional fiduciary work under court supervision, not rewarded if I stayed guardian or if Ashley replaced me. Her job was to preserve Harper's property, account for it, and use it only for Harper's benefit under the rules that applied. Ashley's objection did not vanish. Rebecca still argued that the court should not automatically treat a rehabilitated biological mother as less suitable than a professional stranger. But biology did not make Ashley automatically more qualified either. Daniel explained the practical result over coffee in his office. "Judith is boring," he said. I stared at him. "That's your legal analysis?" "It's a compliment." He meant the estate structure no longer needed family drama to function. Judith did not care who Harper called mom. She did not care who felt insulted by her appointment. She had records, bonding requirements, accounting obligations, investment rules, and no emotional claim to the money. For the first time, I understood why neutrality could feel so powerful. The inheritance no longer needed me to defend it personally. It did not need Ashley to prove she loved Harper. It needed someone who could do the job without confusing love with ownership. That shift closed another door Ashley had been pushing on. If the court accepted Judith's independent structure, Ashley did not need to defeat me to become part of Harper's life. She did not even need financial authority to prove she was serious about rebuilding a relationship. All she needed was Harper's willingness, and Harper had already shown that willingness once. That was why the next court date felt different from every earlier one. It was a status and review hearing, not the final trial of every accusation we had made about one another. Daniel had warned me that the court would likely use it to decide what actually remained disputed after months of investigation, contact, filings, and estate review. Harper did not attend that portion. She went to school. I preferred it that way, and this time the preference did not come from hiding information. She knew what the hearing was for, and had told Elena what she wanted known. Ashley sat beside Rebecca across the aisle. She looked thinner than she had at my dining table months earlier. Not sick, worn. The litigation had stopped being a dramatic return and become a schedule of deadlines, invoices, interviews, and choices. I knew enough about my own legal bills to understand what that meant. The judge did not ask anyone to retell the doorstep story from the beginning. That surprised me until I realized how much had already become undisputed. Ashley had left Harper with me. The guardianship had lasted 13 years. Ashley was more stable now. Harper wanted to remain with me. I was no longer blocking contact. Judith had been proposed as an independent estate fiduciary. Ashley had formally objected and asked for a role in estate management if the person guardianship changed. There was no reason to spend another hour pretending we were still fighting over facts everyone already knew. The court narrowed what remained. First, had Ashley shown enough, under Harper's best interests and the current record, to justify ending the guardianship of Harper's person? Second, did Ashley's request to displace or enter the estate management structure serve Harper's interests better than the independent arrangement already proposed? Everything else became background. The judge set an evidentiary hearing. The phrase changed the atmosphere in the room. Until then, so much of the case had lived in letters, investigator interviews, settlement proposals, declarations, and arguments filtered through lawyers. An evidentiary hearing meant witnesses, testimony, exhibits that could actually be used, questioning on the record, and a ruling based on admissible material rather than every angry thing anyone had ever said during negotiations. Daniel leaned toward me and whispered, "This is where the bargaining phase ends." I looked across the aisle. Rebecca was already writing. Ashley was not. She sat still with both hands clasped in front of her. The court made clear that prior settlement discussions would not become a backdoor for proving motive. The earlier framework had changed how I understood Ashley's strategy, but it could not prove that strategy at the final hearing. But understanding was not the same as evidence. We could not walk into the final hearing and say, "She offered this in settlement, therefore she is greedy." The formal estate filing was different. That was on the record because Ashley had chosen to ask the court for the role. Elena's findings were different. Harper's wishes, conveyed through the approved process, were different. And what Ashley said under oath would be different. On the courthouse steps afterward, the afternoon sun felt too bright. Daniel waited until we were away from the entrance before asking whether I understood what the hearing would require from me. I said yes. He gave me the look he used when I answered too quickly. Then he told me the number. Not an exact bill. A range. Preparation, witness time, review of the investigator material, coordinating the estate record, the hearing itself, possible follow-up. My share of the additional legal expense could easily run another $8,000 to $12,000, depending on how contested the hearing became. I stopped walking. I had already used part of the $24,000 I kept as emergency savings for Daniel's retainer and earlier work. The rest of his fees were moving on to a monthly payment plan. I could manage only because I still had my job, my house payment was predictable, and I had spent years living below what people assumed I could afford. Another $10,000 was not ruin. It was not nothing either. It was a used car. A year of careful saving. A hole in the safety cushion I had spent my adult life building because chaos had taught me what happened when nobody prepared. Daniel did not soften it. You need to know the price of continuing. I looked back at the courthouse doors. There had been a time when the fear of losing Harper would have made me sign almost anything that promised certainty. Shared authority, a title for Ashley, some compromise around the estate. I could have told myself I was buying peace. The temptation was still there because peace had a price tag now. But I could finally see who would actually be paying if I bought it cheaply. Harper. Not in dollars. In authority over her own life. I'm not changing the position, I said. Daniel nodded once. All right. If the judge rules against me after hearing the evidence, we deal with that. But I'm not giving Ashley control Harper doesn't want, because litigation is expensive. That is the decision I needed from you. There was nothing triumphant in his voice. Good. I did not feel triumphant. I felt sick about the money, and strangely calm about the choice. That night, I opened my banking app at the kitchen table. Harper was doing homework beside me. I moved money between accounts to make sure the next legal payment would not touch the mortgage reserve. I reduced the automatic transfer into my vacation savings and stared at the number for a long time. Harper glanced over. More lawyer stuff? Yeah. How bad? I could have said not your problem. The words almost formed on their own. Instead, I said, expensive enough that I'm annoyed. Not dangerous enough that you need to worry about the house or food or school. She considered that. Are you paying it from Dad's money? No. Why not? Because this is my legal fight over the guardianship. Your inheritance is yours. Judith's whole job is to keep adults from deciding their problems are your expenses. Harper nodded and went back to her worksheet. A minute later she said, Thank you. I did not ask what for. I knew. The final preparation created another question I had hoped to avoid. Harper's voice. Elena already had her wishes. The court did not need Harper to become a witness in a family argument just because the adults had failed to solve it. Daniel was clear about that. There were child-focused ways for her position to remain part of the record without making her sit through every accusation. I liked that. Too much. When Elena later told me Harper had asked whether she could be present for the part of the final hearing that affected her directly, my first reaction was immediate. No. The word rose so fast I almost said it. Elena waited. I asked whether Harper had been told she did not have to attend. Yes. Whether anyone had suggested it to her. No. Whether she understood that hearing adults argue could be upsetting. As much as a 13-year-old could understand before experiencing it. I wanted to say, that was exactly why I should decide for her. Then I heard myself. The old logic always sounded best when I was scared. At home that evening, I asked Harper why she wanted to be there. She sat at the foot of her bed, pulling loose thread from a pillow seam. Because everybody keeps saying what I want, she said. I know Elena tells the judge. I know Daniel knows. I just don't want the whole thing to happen like I'm not a real person somewhere else. You don't have to prove anything. I'm not trying to. You don't have to listen to Ashley testify. I know. I sat beside her. What if you hear something that hurts? Harper gave me a tired look. Mom, I've heard things that hurt. There was no drama in it. That was worse. She had read the note. Heard Diane's sentence. Listened to Ashley explain 13 years of absence. Watched money get attached to a relationship she had tried to understand on her own terms. Keeping her out of the courtroom could protect her from a bad afternoon. It could not restore innocence that no longer existed. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want my wishes to be known, and if the judge lets me, I want to be there for the part where they talk about me. Not the whole hearing, not a speech, not control over the case. Presence." I told Elena and Daniel I would not oppose Harper's request. The judge ultimately allowed a limited arrangement. Harper's wishes would remain conveyed through the approved child-focused process. She would not be turned into counsel, referee, or audience for every procedural dispute. But because of her age and specific request, she could attend the relevant portion of the evidentiary hearing after her own position had been addressed. When Daniel told me the request had been approved, I had the strangest reaction. I wanted to protect Harper from what might happen in that room, and I was proud that she no longer needed protection to mean erasure. By the time the hearing date was set, the case had become smaller and more dangerous. Smaller because the noise had been stripped away. No more argument that I was preventing Ashley from knowing Harper. I was not. No more question about whether Ashley had become more stable. She had. No more fantasy that whoever cared for Harper automatically controlled $4.6 million. They did not. The remaining questions were narrow enough to fit on a few pages. Should Harper's home and guardianship be changed? Should Ashley receive authority over Harper's estate instead of the independent fiduciary? Daniel met with me one final time before preparation shifted into witness work. "There may not be a dramatic piece of evidence," he said. "You need to be comfortable with that." Months earlier, that would have terrified me. Now I understood. The strongest record was not a secret. It was what everyone had chosen in plain sight. Ashley's formal filings, Elena's findings, Harper's wishes, Judith's neutral estate structure, my cooperation after I corrected my own mistake. And, if Ashley continued pressing both claims, Ashley's own testimony about why relationship without authority was not enough. Daniel closed the file. "The next time she talks," he said, "we let the record do its job." I thought of Harper at my dining table months earlier, her fingers touching my hand just before I turned another argument into a speech. "Mom, just let her talk." I had thought she was telling me how to survive one conversation. Only now did I understand she had been teaching me how to survive the whole case. The final evidentiary hearing was on the calendar, and for the first time, I knew that protecting Harper might require me to sit beside her and stay silent. The morning of the evidentiary hearing, I woke before my alarm. For months, every stage of the case had opened into another interview, filing, or unanswered question. That morning felt different. The bargaining phase was over. Ashley had kept both claims alive. She still wanted the court to end, or change my guardianship of Harper's person, and she still wanted a court-supervised role around Harper's estate, instead of Judith's independent management. Today, both requests had to stand on admissible evidence. Harper ate half a piece of toast at the kitchen counter. She was dressed more carefully than usual, but not formally enough to look like a child actor in a courtroom drama. Dark pants, a pale sweater, hair tied back. The judge had already received her wishes through the child-focused process and Elena's reports. Harper was not being asked to take the witness stand and argue the case. She had specifically asked to attend the limited portion the judge permitted, and the court had approved it. Even so, when we reached the courthouse and went through security, I felt every protective instinct I had spent months trying to retrain. "You can still wait outside if you want," I told her. Harper looked at me. I heard myself and almost smiled. "I know," she said. That was all it took. I did not offer again. Daniel met us near the courtroom, with a rolling case bag and a legal pad. He looked more tired than nervous. He had prepared me for the least cinematic possibility. No surprise admission, no witness walking in with the answer. The court already had the history: Ashley's abandonment, 13 years of my care, her present stability, Harper's wishes, my changed conduct, and Judith's independence. Today, those facts had to be tested, not repeated louder. The hearing began with Harper outside the courtroom with a court staff member, while the judge handled preliminary matters. I sat beside Daniel and kept my hands flat on the table so I would not twist my ring finger even though I had never worn a wedding ring there. Across the aisle, Ashley sat with Rebecca. She looked composed, but not untouched. Months of litigation had changed something in her face. She had always been good at arranging herself before entering a room. That morning the arrangement looked expensive. Elena testified first. Most of it was not new to me, which was the point. She described Ashley's present stability without insulting it. Stable employment, stable housing. No evidence of danger. No evidence that Ashley was incapable of appropriate contact with Harper. She also described Harper's life with me. 13 years in the same caregiving relationship, school and community ties, a secure home, a child who consistently said she did not want the guardianship terminated and did not want to be uprooted. Elena did not call Ashley greedy. She did not call me a saint. She said that rehabilitation by a biological parent did not erase the effect of moving a 13-and-a-half-year-old child out of the only home she remembered. The judge asked a few questions about contact. Elena explained that Harper had initially chosen to continue seeing Ashley, that I had cooperated after my early resistance, and that one later visit ended early, after Harper asked that the estate not be discussed, and felt the boundary was not respected. She was careful with even that. One bad contact did not prove Ashley could never have a relationship with Harper. It proved Harper had expressed a boundary and reacted when she felt it had been crossed. That distinction mattered. I had spent the first half of the case wanting every bad act to become a verdict. Elena refused to do that for either of us. Judith's part was even less emotional. Her estate management structure did not depend on who won the guardianship dispute or who Harper called mom. The money would be accounted for, invested, and used under court supervision for Harper's benefit. The impersonality Ashley had treated as an insult was what made the arrangement clean. By late morning, the courtroom had done something months of arguments had not. It had stripped away nearly every issue people had used to avoid the central one. Ashley did not need custody in order to speak to Harper. She did not need to manage the estate in order to know Harper. I did not need to control the estate in order to remain Harper's mother in daily life. And Harper did not need to choose between knowing where she came from and keeping the home she trusted. The only person still insisting those things belonged in one package was Ashley. When Ashley took the stand, Rebecca began with the strongest version of her case. That was her job. Ashley spoke about the life she had now, the stability she had built, the remorse she felt over leaving Harper, and the humiliation of returning to discover that every meaningful role had been filled by someone else. She did not deny that I had raised Harper well. In some ways, that made her testimony more persuasive. She said she was not asking the court to erase me. She wanted the court to recognize that rehabilitation had to mean something. Rebecca asked what Ashley wanted from the guardianship proceeding. A real path back to being her mother, Ashley said. Not a bad answer. Then Rebecca asked about the estate request. Ashley said she believed a parent who had demonstrated stability should not automatically be excluded in favor of a professional stranger. She emphasized that she understood the money belonged to Harper, and that any estate role would carry fiduciary duties and court oversight. Again, not a bad answer. If the hearing had ended there, Ashley would not have sounded like a woman demanding a check. She would have sounded like a mother who believed legal authority was part of restoration. Daniel had warned me that this was likely. He also warned me not to confuse likely with harmless. The judge allowed Harper into the courtroom for the limited portion that concerned the future structure of contact and Ashley's own stated reasons for continuing the person and estate claims. A staff member brought her in quietly. She sat beside me. Her knee touched mine under the table. I wanted to tell her she did not have to listen to anything that followed. I did not. Daniel stood for cross-examination. He did not begin with the doorstep. He did not wave Ashley's note in the air. He did not ask her to defend every silent birthday. Those facts were already in the record, and none of them answered what she was asking for now. Instead, he started with the present. Ashley agreed that Harper had been permitted to see her. She agreed that I was no longer preventing voluntary contact. She agreed that Harper had attended meetings because Harper chose to. She agreed that the current guardianship order did not require Harper to reject Ashley. She agreed that Judith's appointment would not legally stop Ashley from having a relationship with Harper. Each answer was small. Together they took away an excuse. Daniel asked whether Ashley could continue to speak to Harper, if Harper wanted that, even if I remained guardian of Harper's person. Yes, Ashley said, but that's not the same as being her mother. Daniel asked what was missing. Authority, she said. The word entered the room without anyone raising a voice. Ashley explained that a biological mother should not have to exist at the pleasure of a guardian who had replaced her. She wanted involvement in important decisions. She wanted her rehabilitation recognized. She wanted the possibility of a parental role that meant more than visits Harper could end whenever she was uncomfortable. Daniel asked, "And the estate?" Ashley's shoulders tightened slightly. That's part of her future. Is it part of your relationship with her? It is part of being responsible for her. Daniel did not argue. He asked whether Judith could be responsible for the money, while Ashley built a relationship with Harper. Ashley said Judith could manage accounts, but management was not the same as family judgment. Does knowing Harper require you to exercise family judgment over $4.6 million? Rebecca objected to the phrasing. The judge narrowed the question and directed Daniel to separate the issues. That helped him more than it helped Ashley. He asked whether Ashley could have contact without being appointed to any role over the estate. Yes. He asked whether she could apologize without being appointed. Yes. Attend a school event if Harper invited her? Yes. Learn Harper's interests? Yes. Build trust over time? Ashley hesitated, then said yes. Daniel looked down at his notes. My pulse had become loud enough that I could feel it in my fingertips. This was the point where the old version of me would have needed to help. I would have wanted to explain why each yes mattered, to make the court understand the pattern before Ashley could reshape it. Daniel did not need me. Harper did not need me. The silence did not need me. Daniel asked, "If all of those parts of a relationship remain available to you, what does the estate appointment give you that the relationship does not?" Ashley looked at Rebecca before answering. Standing. You already have standing to make the requests you filed. I mean, as her mother. Daniel waited. Ashley continued. She said I had gotten 13 years of decisions, 13 years of school forms, doctors, birthdays, ordinary life. She said she had come back to find herself treated as though biology were an embarrassing technicality, while I kept the title, the home, and all the authority. She said Ryan had left millions to the daughter. Both of them had failed in different ways, and now strangers were telling her that money had nothing to do with restoring a parent. There were pieces of truth inside what she said. That was why it was dangerous. I had gotten 13 years of ordinary life. But Ashley spoke about those years as though I had been awarded them. My body reacted before my mind did. My shoulders pulled forward. I could already hear the sentence forming in my head. You left them. The nights, the school forms, the fevers, the money worries, the first word mom. You left all of it. Harper's hand closed around mine. Not hard. Exactly enough. I looked at her. She did not whisper this time. She did not have to. 13 years earlier, she had been a baby who could only cry until somebody came. Months earlier at our dining table, she had stopped me with 4 words because she wanted to hear what Ashley would reveal if I stopped correcting her. Now she squeezed my hand once. I leaned back. Daniel asked the question, if Harper's estate contained nothing, would you accept the same relationship with your daughter? No one moved. Ashley blinked. Daniel did not repeat it immediately. He gave her room to answer. That's not the situation, she said. I understand. I'm asking you to assume it for the question. If Harper's estate contained nothing, would you accept the same relationship currently available to you with your daughter? Ashley looked toward the judge, then at Rebecca. Rebecca's face remained professional. Ashley said the hypothetical was unfair because the money existed and had changed the legal landscape. She said Ryan's estate was part of Harper's reality, whether anyone liked it or not. She said she had spent months being treated like a threat for wanting a role that would ordinarily belong to a parent. Daniel asked again, more narrowly. No inheritance. Same Harper. Same opportunity to see her if she wants to see you. Same chance to build trust over time. Would that be enough? Ashley's jaw tightened. She started talking about what the case had cost her. Not only money, time away from work, legal fees, debt, months of being investigated, the humiliation of having her apartment inspected, her income examined, and her worst decision repeated in filings. She said I had gotten all the good years, and now everyone expected her to be grateful for visits while a stranger controlled millions her daughter had inherited. The judge directed her to answer the question if she could. Ashley exhaled sharply. I felt Harper's fingers still around mine. The answer Ashley needed was one word. Yes. She could have said yes, and then argued about the rest. She could have said yes, and preserved the idea that Harper alone was the thing she had returned for. Instead, she looked across the room at me and said, I'm not walking away with nothing after everything this has cost me. The silence afterward did not feel empty. It felt occupied. I saw Ashley realize what she had said before anyone else moved. Her eyes shifted. Harper sat beside me, 13.5 years old, pale sweater, hair tied back, one hand still holding mine. Not nothing, not an estate, not a role, a girl. Harper's voice was quiet. I'm right here. Rebecca closed her eyes for less than a second. Ashley turned toward Harper. That's not what I meant. Every instinct I had ever had, as Harper's protector, rose at once. I wanted to tell Ashley exactly what she had meant. I wanted to explain it to the judge, to Harper, to the whole room. I wanted to rescue Harper from having to understand the sentence by translating it into something cleaner. Then I remembered the first lesson Harper had given me when Ashley returned. Let her talk. So I did nothing. Ashley tried to repair the sentence herself. She said she meant she was not willing to leave court with no recognition of her parental role. She said she was talking about everything she had invested trying to rebuild a place in Harper's life. She said nothing referred to legal status. Not Harper. Daniel did not pounce. The judge did not lecture her. Harper did not argue. That made the repair sound exactly as large as it was. When testimony ended, the judge took a recess before ruling. We waited in a side hallway where nobody knew what to say. Harper sat beside me with her arms folded. I asked whether she wanted water. She shook her head. I did not ask what she was thinking. For once, silence was not me avoiding something. It was me leaving space that belonged to her. When we returned, the ruling was narrower than the emotional weight of the morning. The judge did not punish Ashley for one sentence. The ruling rested on the record that had been built over months. Harper had lived with me for 13 years and consistently wanted to remain in that home. Ashley's current stability was real, but stability did not make uprooting Harper serve her best interests. My early attempts to block contact had been corrected, and the present record did not show that I was preventing a relationship. Ashley therefore had a path to know Harper without terminating the guardianship. The guardianship of Harper's person remained with me. My knees went weak under the table, even though I had known the evidence favored that result. On the estate side, the court kept the property separate from the person case. Harper's inheritance did not become a parental prize attached to rehabilitation. Judith's independent management structure remained the approved path because it protected Harper's property without tying financial authority to the custody outcome. Ashley's request to displace or enter that role was denied. There was no dramatic sanction, no handcuffs, no order declaring Ashley a fraud. Nothing from Harper's estate would reimburse Ashley for the money she had spent pursuing her claims. Her litigation costs remained hers. The court also did not give her some new compelled schedule of expanding access over Harper's objections. Future contact would continue only within the lawful guardianship structure, and with Harper's welfare and wishes carrying the weight they had carried throughout the investigation. The judge finished. Papers shifted. People stood. That was how the legal threat ended. Not with applause, with an order. Outside the courtroom, I finally let myself breathe all the way down into my lungs. Daniel touched my shoulder once, said he would call after the written order was entered, and gave us privacy. Rebecca walked a few steps away with Ashley. I expected them to leave together. Instead, Ashley said something to Rebecca, then turned back. She looked at Harper. Without the witness chair, the lawyers and the estate request between them, Ashley suddenly seemed smaller. Harper. Harper stopped. I stopped beside her. Ashley came closer, but not too close. Her eyes were red now, and for the first time that day she had nothing in her hands. I know I said it wrong in there. Harper did not answer. Ashley swallowed. I know more than that was wrong. The courthouse hallway moved around us, shoes on tile. A deputy speaking quietly near the elevator. Someone laughing far enough away that the sound belonged to another life. Ashley looked at me once, then back at Harper. Can I have another chance? The question did not mention custody. It did not mention Judith. It did not mention Ryan's estate. There was no lawyer language left in it. For 13 years, I had believed being Harper's mother meant I should know the answer before anyone asked her. Harper turned her head toward me. Not for permission. I understood that now. She was checking whether I would keep my promise to let the answer be hers. I said nothing. Ashley waited for Harper to answer. For once, there was nothing I could do that would improve the moment. I could not explain Ashley's question for her. I could not soften the sentence she had said under oath. I could not make Harper less hurt by telling her what I thought she should feel. So I stood beside my daughter in the courthouse hallway and let the silence belong to her. Harper looked at Ashley for a long time. The anger I had expected was not there. She looked tired instead, in the particular way a 13-year-old looks when adults have made something simple too complicated for too long. I don't want another meeting right now, she said. Ashley's face tightened. I'm not asking about a court meeting. I know. I mean just us. No Elena. No lawyers. Harper nodded once. I know what you mean. Ashley seemed to search for the right version of herself to offer. Then what are you saying? I'm saying I need you to stop asking for things from me for a while. That landed harder than a dramatic refusal would have. Harper did not say never. She did not tell Ashley she hated her. She did not turn the ruling into a punishment. She told her that the months of meetings, filings, questions about custody, and arguments about Ryan's estate had made every conversation feel attached to a decision someone wanted from her. She wanted distance from that. She wanted to go back to school without wondering whether a text from Ashley was really about seeing her or about what came next legally. Ashley glanced at me. It was quick, almost instinctive. For 13 years, everyone in our family had looked to me when something uncomfortable needed to be carried. Diane had done it first. Ashley had done it in a much bigger way. Even Harper, when she was little, had looked at me because that was what children were supposed to do. This time, I did not step in. Ashley looked back at Harper. So that's it? For now. The two words mattered. Harper left a future, where a future belonged somewhere she could reach later if she wanted it. Ashley swallowed. What would have to change? Harper considered that before answering. I'd have to believe you want to know me, even if there's nothing else you get to be. Ashley's eyes filled. Harper's voice stayed quiet. No money, no title, no being in charge, just me. The hallway seemed to shrink around them. I do want you, Ashley said. Harper did not argue with her. Maybe. I just don't know if I believe that enough yet. It was the kindest answer Ashley had not earned, and the harshest one Harper needed to give. Ashley looked at me again. This time the question in her face was obvious. Say something. Tell Harper she should keep trying. Tell her that biology deserves another chance. Tell her not to close a door on her mother. I knew that request without hearing it because I had spent most of my life being asked to convert other people's consequences into family peace. Lauren, Ashley said softly. I shook my head. Not in anger. No, I said. This part is hers. Ashley's mouth opened, then closed. There was nothing left for her to petition me for. Harper turned toward the elevator. I went with her. Behind us, Ashley remained in the hallway beside Rebecca, still employed, still housed, still capable of building whatever life came next. The court had not destroyed her. It had only refused to give her the authority she had asked for, and Harper had refused to give her the relationship she wanted on demand. That was the consequence. Not ruin. Limits. The written orders came through over the next several weeks. Daniel called when the guardianship order was entered in final form, and again when the estate side was settled enough that Judith could move forward without the custody case hanging over every decision. Nothing in those calls felt like victory music. They sounded like administrative closure dates, filings, signatures, final invoices. The court did not shift Ashley's legal costs to Harper's estate or authorize reimbursement for either claim. By then, the expense figure Ashley's own side had disclosed during the litigation was close to $38,000, some from savings and the rest carried on credit and a personal loan. She would keep her apartment and her job, and the bills created by the strategy she had chosen. I felt no pleasure hearing that. I understood the weight of legal fees too well. My own savings account had taken damage, and Daniel's payment plan would remain part of my monthly budget for a while. But there was an important difference between a cost and an injustice. Ashley had been allowed to bring her claims. She had been heard. She had chosen to keep pressing after a relationship with Harper remained available without financial authority. The fact that the fight had become expensive did not make Harper responsible for paying for it. More important than the money, the court gave Ashley no automatic path to expand contact over Harper's objections. If Harper wanted distance, the legal structure did not force her into a schedule designed to reward adult persistence. If she wanted contact later, that door was not locked either. For the first time since Ryan died, the future relationship question belonged almost entirely where it should have belonged. With Harper, I thought the quiet after the case would feel like relief. Instead, the first week felt strangely empty. For months, I had measured time in calls, documents, filings, and hearings. Then suddenly, there was a Tuesday when nobody called. I went to work. Harper went to school. I came home and found a cereal bowl in the sink even though the dishwasher was 6 inches away. It was wonderful. 3 nights after the final order, my phone rang while I was making dinner. Diane's name appeared on the screen. I had not seen that name attached to a live call in years. For a second, I simply watched it ring. Harper was upstairs doing homework. The kitchen smelled like onions and tomato sauce. A pot simmered on the stove. There was nothing dramatic about the room, which made the name on my phone feel even more out of place. I answered, Lauren. Diane's voice was older than I remembered. Softer, too, though softness from my mother had always made me cautious because it usually arrived before a request. She asked whether the case was really over, saying Ashley had called. I said yes. Then she began doing what she had always done. She did not defend the estate claim directly. She did not say Ashley deserved the money. She said Ashley was devastated. She said our family had already lost 13 years. She said Harper was young and might make a permanent choice out of temporary anger. She said somebody needed to keep things from becoming impossible to repair. Somebody. I leaned against the counter and watched a bubble break on the surface of the sauce. Who? I asked. Diane paused. What do you mean? Who is the somebody? You're her mother in every way that matters to her. She listens to you. There was a time when that sentence would have felt like the recognition I had wanted from Diane for years. Now all I heard was the assignment hidden inside it. Use your place with Harper to make Harper easier for Ashley. Diane continued. She said Ashley was still Harper's biological mother. She said blood did not disappear because of a bad court case. She asked me to remind Harper that people say things they do not mean under pressure. I thought about the first night. Harper in a carrier. One bag. Diane's voice telling me what the family expected me to carry. She is not your way back to Ashley, I said. Diane went quiet. And she is not Ashley's way back to you. She is not a bridge you get to walk across, because the adults in this family finally regret where they ended up. That's not what I'm doing. It is exactly what you're doing. Her voice sharpened, familiar now. I'm trying to keep the family from being permanently broken. There it was, the old emergency. The family had broken something and Lauren was expected to fix it. I turned down the burner. Harper is not a burden, I said. And she is not a bridge. The silence on the line changed. Diane remembered the sentence. I knew she did. I did not repeat it to punish her. I did not need to. If you ever want a relationship with Harper, I said, you start by respecting what she decides. You don't use me to negotiate with her. You don't tell me to remind her who anyone is. She knows exactly who everyone is. Diane's voice became smaller. Can you at least tell her I called? Yes. That was all I offered. Not forgiveness. Not access. Information. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a moment, with my phone in my hand. 13 years earlier, Diane's refusal to help had pushed me into the role of the person who absorbed everything. That night, I had finally handed the responsibility back. When Harper came downstairs, I told her Diane had called. She stopped near the refrigerator. What did she want? She wants you to remember Ashley is your mother and not make anything permanent because you're hurt. Harper gave me a look that was almost comically 13. I know who Ashley is. I told her that. Did Grandma ask to talk to me? She asked me to tell you she called. Harper opened the refrigerator and looked inside, even though she knew dinner was 5 minutes away. I don't want to call her. Okay. She glanced back at me, waiting for the rest. There was no rest. No speech? She asked. I'm retired. That got a reluctant smile. For now, she said. Apparently that phrase runs in the family. She closed the refrigerator. Diane's call did not turn into another storyline. Harper did not call her back. Diane did not show up at our house. The boundary existed, and for once our family allowed a boundary to remain a boundary. The estate became quieter too. Judith's appointment was finalized, and once the administrative pieces were in place, she met with Harper and me to explain what came next, without making a 13-year-old feel like a financial institution. The assets were Harper's. Judith would manage and account for them under court supervision. Appropriate expenses could be paid for Harper, while larger decisions followed the rules of the protected estate. The money was not mine or Ashley's. It was not an apology account anyone could spend from to repair Ryan's absence. Harper asked what happened when she turned 18. Judith explained that different assets and court restrictions could have different paths, but the goal was to preserve the estate until Harper was legally able to control what belonged to her, with education and long-term planning handled carefully in the meantime. Harper asked whether she could use some of it for college someday. Yes, Judith said. If that remains part of your plan. Do I have to go somewhere expensive because I can? No. Harper looked relieved. That told me more about what the inheritance had felt like to her than the number ever had. We did not move. I did not pay off my mortgage with Harper's money. Harper did not arrive at school in a new car she was too young to drive. The same backpack remained by the same kitchen chair. I kept paying for groceries, utilities, school clothes, and the ordinary shape of our life from my income as I always had. When legitimate expenses came up that properly belonged to Harper's estate, Judith handled them through the process. The existence of $4.6 million stopped being something that stood in the middle of every relationship. It became what it should have been from the beginning, a resource for Harper's future, not a vote on who loved her most. A few weeks later, Harper and I were driving home from an orthodontist appointment when she brought up Ryan. There was no trigger I could see. We had stopped at a red light, and she was looking out the window at a man unloading boxes from a delivery van. "I still don't know what I'm supposed to call him in my head," she said. "Ryan?" She nodded. "My dad sounds wrong. Biological father sounds like a science worksheet." I waited. "He knew about me," she said. "He paid because he had to. He never called. Then he died and left me everything." The light changed. I drove. It's like he did the biggest responsible thing after never doing the smaller ones. That was exactly the problem, and I was grateful she had named it instead of asking me to solve it. "Maybe those things can both be true," I said. She turned toward me. "He failed you by being absent, and the money is still yours to accept. Does taking it mean I'm forgiving him? No. Does it mean he loved me?" I could have given her the sentence people use when they want death to make a person gentler than life did. "He loved you in his own way." I did not. "I don't know what he felt," I said. "The will tells us what he decided to do with his property. It doesn't tell us what he would have done if you needed him on a Tuesday when you were 6. Harper was quiet. "You don't owe him a nicer story because he died," I added. "And you don't have to reject what he left you to prove his absence hurt." She looked back out the window. After a while, she said, "That seems unfairly complicated." "It is. Can't adults ever be one thing?" "Apparently not." She smiled a little. That was the only conversation we needed to have about Ryan then. No graveside revelation. No secret letter. No explanation arriving too late to be challenged. Harper was allowed to inherit from a man without turning him into the father he had not been. By the end of that month, the case stopped being the first thing I thought about when I woke up. That was how I knew it was really ending. Not because Ashley disappeared from biology. Not because a judge had declared our family pure and hers false. Ashley still went to work. She still had an apartment. She still had debt from a case she had chosen to continue. Somewhere, she was living with the fact that the court had denied her custody and estate authority, and that Harper had asked for distance without promising forever. I did not monitor her. That surprised me most. For years, control had been my answer to uncertainty. Then Ashley returned and I tried to use it again until Harper made me see what it was costing us. By the time the case ended, I no longer needed to know what Ashley was doing every day in order to believe Harper was safe. One Thursday afternoon, I came home from work and found Harper at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. For half a second, the sight of official-looking forms made my stomach tighten out of habit. Then Harper held one up. "It's for the spring overnight science trip," she said. "And before you say anything, I did not put it under a pizza coupon." I set my purse on the counter. "That is impressive personal growth. There are 3 signatures." "Of course there are. One says parent or guardian." I took the form from her. 13 years earlier, the word guardian had frightened me because it described a job I had never expected to hold. Later, I had resented it because it seemed smaller than the word Harper used for me. Then Ashley came back and reminded me that legal titles mattered in ways feelings could not erase. Now I could see both words without needing one to defeat the other. Guardian was the authority the court had given me. Mom was the relationship Harper had built with me. Neither gave me ownership of her. I signed where the form asked me to sign and slid it back. Harper checked the line, frowned, and pushed it toward me again. "You missed the emergency contact section. I was testing you." "You were absolutely not." I filled it in. She gathered the papers, shoved them into her backpack, and headed toward the hallway before stopping. "Mom?" I looked up. "Can we get tacos after practice tomorrow?" There was no wait in the word, no courtroom, no argument about biology. No one else present to hear who had won it. Just dinner. "Yeah," I said. "Text me when you're done." She disappeared down the hall. 13 years earlier, saving Harper had meant picking up a baby because nobody else came. For a long time after that, I thought loving her meant becoming the person who always knew what door should stay closed. I know better now. Sometimes being her mother means standing in front of danger. Sometimes it means giving her the truth and trusting what she sees. And sometimes it means signing a school form, planning tacos, and letting her choose the doors that belong to her. From the hallway, Harper called, "Don't forget practice, Mom." "I won't," I said.